Hey guys, tonight we venture deep into the heart of ancient Africa, not to explore its magnificent empires or its renowned artistry by daylight, but to listen to the whispers of its starlit nights, to uncover the forgotten legends of its shape-shifting spirits and the profound wisdom they often carried. Imagine the vast savanna stretching out under a velvet sky, the air alive with the chirping of unseen insects and the distant roar of a lion, and the flickering firelight casting dancing shadows that seem to hint at forms not quite human, not quite animal. For in this ancient world, the veil between our reality and the spirit realm was believed to be incredibly thin, and beings could slip between shapes as easily as water through your fingers. Honestly, between trying to figure out if that unusually intelligent-looking gazelle patiently watching you is actually your great aunt Makeda trying to give you some much-needed life advice, or if that sudden mischievous whirlwind kicking up dust is just the wind, and not a trickster spirit about to creatively rearrange your entire campsite for its own amusement, you'd probably be in a constant state of bewildered awe and possibly very mild respectful panic. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It always means a lot to hear from you, so feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you settle by that crackling fire, the immense African night pressing in around you, cool and filled with a million unfamiliar sounds, you begin to sense that this is a land where the seen and the unseen dance very closely together. The vastness of the landscape itself, the endless rolling savannas dotted with acacia trees, the dense mysterious forests teeming with hidden life, the powerful rivers carving their way through ancient lands, all of it feels imbued with a potent living spirit. A mainstream historical fact, central to understanding many traditional African worldviews, is the widespread belief in an animate universe, a perception that spirits, energies, and consciousness reside not just in humans but in animals, plants, rocks, rivers, mountains, and even the very air you breathe. This isn't just a backdrop for human drama, it's an active participating and often profoundly sentient environment. And within this vibrant, spirit-infused world, one of the most fascinating and widespread beliefs is that of shape-shifting. Imagine beings not quite gods in the Olympian sense, perhaps, nor mere animals, but powerful entities. Nature spirits, ancestral guardians, elemental forces, or even complex trickster figures who possess the extraordinary ability to change their physical form at will. One moment they might appear as a majestic lion, the next as a wise old woman sitting by the village well, then perhaps as a sudden gust of wind, a particular configuration of stars, or even an unassuming pebble by the path. The forms they take are as varied as the African continent itself, and the reasons for their transformations are equally diverse. These aren't just whimsical characters from fanciful fireside tales, though the stories about them are indeed captivating. For the people of ancient Africa, these shape-shifting spirits were considered very real and active participants in the world. They could influence human destiny, offer profound wisdom, test the character of individuals, uphold cosmic balance, or sometimes just cause a bit of delightful or terrifying mischief to remind humans of their place in the grand scheme of things. So if a particularly eloquent and rather philosophical hyena started giving you detailed life coaching out on the moonlit savannah, your first thought probably wouldn't be, wow, that hyena has an impressively nuanced vocabulary and some surprisingly good insights into my career path. But rather, okay, which revered ancestor, or perhaps a slightly irritated but ultimately well-meaning nature spirit, am I currently having an in-depth conversation with, and more importantly, did I remember to bring along an appropriately respectful small offering of dried berries, or perhaps a nicely polished riverstone? The forgotten aspect of these beliefs is of course relative. While many of these traditions are still alive and deeply meaningful in parts of Africa today, for much of the wider world, the sheer depth, complexity, and philosophical richness of these ancient narratives of transformation have often been overlooked or simplified. Tonight, we're gently parting the veil, trying to catch a glimpse of that original understanding. And the wisdom these shapeshifters carried, that's the truly captivating part. Their ability to change form often served as a profound metaphor for the ever-changing nature of life itself, for the interconnectedness of all beings, and for the idea that truth and wisdom can be found in the most unexpected of guises. A spirit appearing as a humble tortoise might teach a lesson about patience and perseverance. A fearsome leopard might embody royal power or the swiftness of justice. A trickster changing from a spider to a man to a wisp of smoke might, through its very chaos, reveal the folly of human arrogance or the importance of cleverness and adaptability. Their version of, "Is this person trying to catfish me?" on an ancient African dating app, had such a thing existed, was probably more along the lines of, is this extraordinarily charming stranger with the unusually mesmerizing eyes actually a charming stranger? Or are they perhaps a powerful river spirit in disguise about to turn me into a small, unassuming, and rather damp river reed for not properly recycling my papyrus scrolls? High stakes indeed in the game of appearances. A quirky and rather common superstition that might hint at this ever-present possibility of transformation could be the specific way people addressed or interacted with certain animals encountered in the wild, especially if the animal behaved in an unusual or particularly knowing manner. There might be a particular greeting offered or a specific avoidance behavior just in case that wasn't merely a baboon, but Uncle Thabo from 3 generations back checking up on how you were tending the family shrine. Anthropologists and historians of religion still engage in extensive debate regarding the precise origins, the complex diffusion patterns, and the intricate symbolic variations of specific shape-shifting motifs and spirit typologies across the incredibly diverse mosaic of different African linguistic families and cultural groups, and the extent to which these might represent deeply shared ancient cosmological frameworks versus more localized, independent developments or later borrowings and adaptations through migration and cultural exchange. What is clear as you settle into this ancient African night is that you've entered a world where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual, the human and the animal, the mundane and the magical are wonderfully and sometimes perilously fluid. The savanna around you isn't just earth and grass, it's alive with a secret soul. A soul that can whisper on the wind, gaze out from the eyes of a serpent, or offer profound wisdom through the unexpected cackle of a hyena. And the key to navigating this world lies in listening, carefully observing, keenly and always being prepared for the unexpected transformation. The flickering firelight of your ancient African campsite as you've now settled into our journey seems to make the shadows dance with an almost deliberate life, hinting at those elusive, shape-shifting spirits that populated the beliefs of this vast continent. But to truly begin to understand why such transformations were considered not just possible, but a profound aspect of reality, you first need to immerse yourself in the very way the world was perceived. For in many ancient African traditions, the landscape around you, the rustling grasses of the savanna, the gnarled branches of an ancient baobab tree, the flowing waters of a life-giving river, even the very stones underfoot, was not merely an inert backdrop to human existence. No, this was a world truly vibrantly and often powerfully alive with spirit. This understanding, often referred to by scholars as animism, is a mainstream historical fact foundational to countless indigenous belief systems across Africa and indeed the globe. It's a worldview where spiritual life consciousness, or a vital force, is attributed not just to humans and animals, but also to plants, rocks, rivers, mountains, the wind, the rain, the sun, and the moon. There isn't a stark division between the living and the non-living in the way a purely materialistic modern science might define it. Instead, every element of creation is seen as possessing its own intrinsic essence, its own spirit, its own capacity to influence and be influenced. Forget just talking to your houseplants to encourage them to grow. In this ancient African worldview, your houseplants, the ancient fig tree in the village center, and the distant, haze-shrouded mountain on the horizon, might all have not just a spirit, but quite possibly an opinion on your recent life choices, and perhaps even a designated representative in the local spirit council. Imagine yourself walking through this world. The great weathered granite outcrop you pass it isn't just a geological formation. It could be the abode of an ancient earth spirit, a guardian of that particular territory. The majestic river that provides water for your village and nourishment for your crops isn't just a body of flowing H2O. It's a powerful deity, a sinuous, shape-shifting entity with moods, demands, and blessings to bestow. That enormous, gnarled tree that has stood for generations at the edge of the forest, it's not just timber and leaves, it's a sacred elder, perhaps home to ancestral spirits, or a potent nature spirit that watches over the forest's creatures and must be approached with reverence. Their version of an environmental impact assessment, before, say, clearing a new field for planting, probably involved a lengthy and very polite negotiation with the resident spirit of the land, likely involving some well-chosen offerings and a solemn promise not to disturb any particularly sacred anthills or spiritually significant termite mounds. This belief in a world suffused with spirit naturally led to a deep sense of interconnectedness between humans and their environment. People understood themselves not as separate from or masters of nature, but as an integral part of this living, breathing, spirit-filled cosmos. Their actions had direct consequences not just on the physical world, but on the spiritual balance of that world. Therefore, respect, reciprocity, and ritual were essential for maintaining a harmonious relationship with these myriad unseen forces. You would see this reflected in countless daily practices. Before hunting, prayers and offerings might be made to the spirit of the forest or the particular animal species being sought, asking for its permission and its sacrifice. Before planting the earth, spirit would be propitiated to ensure fertility. When crossing a powerful river, a small offering, perhaps a few beads, a bit of food, or a libation of beer, might be cast into the waters to appease the river god and ensure safe passage. A quirky and rather charming tidbit might be the specific, localized ways in which people interacted with these nature spirits. Perhaps in one region it was believed that a particular type of smooth, water-worn stone found in a riverbed held the whisper of the river spirit itself. And by holding it to your ear and listening with a quiet mind, you could discern its mood or its messages. Or maybe before felling a large tree needed for a canoe or for building a new hut, a specific chant would be sung to the tree's spirit, explaining the need, asking for its forgiveness, and promising that its wood would be put to good and respectful use. This animistic worldview is the fertile ground from which beliefs in shape-shifting spirits so naturally spring. If a river, a tree, or a mountain already possesses a powerful sentient spirit, then it's not such a great conceptual leap to imagine that spirit choosing to manifest itself in a more mobile or interactive form. Perhaps as an animal associated with that place, like a crocodile for a river or a leopard for a forest, or even at times in human guise to deliver a message or test the character of those who encounter it. The spirit isn't becoming something else entirely, it's simply choosing a different vessel, a different outward appearance for its enduring essence. Anthropologists and scholars of comparative religion still engage in fascinating debates regarding the precise distinctions and complex overlaps within various traditional African spiritual systems between what might be categorized as nature spirits, those intrinsically tied to specific locations or natural phenomena, versus ancestral spirits, the spirits of deceased humans who continue to influence the living and might also choose to inhabit or manifest through natural forms or animals, versus deities more powerful, often named supernatural beings with broader domains of influence in how these different categories of spiritual entities were perceived to interact interillumini or even transform into one another within local cosmologies. What is clear is that for you as an individual living in this ancient spirit-infused Africa, the world around you was a place of constant dynamic and often quite personal spiritual encounter. You wouldn't just take a rock for granted, as it were. That particular rock, especially if it was unusually shaped or located in a significant spot, might just be the centuries-old abode of Great Uncle Kwame's third cousin, twice removed on his mother's side, now existing as the slightly grumpy but generally benevolent spirit of things that are very hard and uncomfortable to sit on. Best to nod respectfully as you pass by and perhaps avoid chipping off any bits for your new hearth. This understanding that the world is truly alive, that spirits reside in all things, and that the boundaries between different forms of existence are fluid and permeable, is the essential key to unlocking the forgotten legends of shape-shifting. It's a world where transformation is not just a magical anomaly, but an inherent possibility within a cosmos that is itself constantly changing, constantly interacting, and always filled with soul. The ancient African world you've stepped into, as you're beginning to perceive, is not a silent, unfeeling landscape. It is a place where every rock river and rustling leaf is alive with spirit. A realm where the boundaries between the physical and the ethereal are wonderfully and sometimes quite alarmingly porous. This deep animistic understanding, this sense of an earth imbued with consciousness, naturally sets the stage for some truly fascinating interactions with the creatures who share this vibrant land. For in many ancient African legends, animals were far more than just fauna. They were often wise counselors, potent messengers from the spirit world, or even the very guises adopted by powerful shape-shifting entities seeking to guide, test, or impart profound wisdom to humanity from the humblest villager right up to the mightiest king. A mainstream historical fact is that folklore from across the vast and diverse continent of Africa is exceptionally rich in tales where animals act as fully sentient beings. They talk, they reason, they scheme, they exhibit a whole spectrum of human-like emotions, and very often a level of wisdom or cunning that can surpass that of their human counterparts. These weren't just cute talking animals from children's stories. They were often seen as direct conduits to the spirit world, embodiments of ancestral spirits or even nature deities themselves in a temporary, relatable form. So, if you were an ancient African ruler, say a king or a powerful chief, and a rather unassuming tortoise started offering you surprisingly astute and well-reasoned advice on matters of statecraft foreign policy, or perhaps just where to find the best wild honey, you probably wouldn't just dismiss it as that weird, overly chatty tortoise again. You'd most likely listen very carefully, take copious mental notes, and possibly offer the sagacious reptile a particularly juicy piece of fruit or a comfortable spot by the royal hearth as a well-deserved consultation fee. The very concept of shape-shifting, which we introduced earlier, is key here. If a powerful spirit, perhaps a guardian of the forest, a deity of the river, or revered ancestor, wished to communicate with humans or observe their actions, what better way than to take on the unassuming form of an animal? It allowed them to move unseen to test the true character of individuals who might behave differently if they knew they were in the presence of a powerful spirit, or to deliver messages in a way that was both memorable and deeply symbolic. Consider some of the recurring animal figures in these ancient tales. The tortoise, as mentioned, often appears as a symbol of slow, methodical, but ultimately profound wisdom, patience, and an ancient understanding of the world's secrets. Its hard shell might symbolize protection or impenetrability to foolishness. Legends might tell of a king facing a terrible dilemma, and a humble tortoise emerging from the bush offers the simple, overlooked solution that saves the kingdom. The spider particularly. Anansi, in many West African traditions, though stories of wise or cunning spiders appear elsewhere too, is another fascinating figure. While often a trickster whose actions are driven by wit and a desire to outsmart others, Anansi's tales are almost invariably laden with moral lessons. His clever schemes, even when they backfire, reveal truths about human nature, the folly of greed or arrogance, and the importance of intelligence over brute strength. A king listening to a tale of Anansi might learn valuable lessons in diplomacy strategy, or simply understanding the complex motivations of his own subjects. Certain birds were also widely regarded as messengers from the spirit world, or as possessors of special knowledge. The owl, with its silent flight and nocturnal habits, might be seen as a harbinger of secrets or a messenger from the realm of the dead. Eagles or large hawks soaring high above could be odd symbols of royal power vision and a connection to the sky deities. Their sudden appearance, their calls, or the direction of their flight could all be interpreted by skilled diviners or wise elders as omens or direct messages relevant to the ruler or the community. The hare or rabbit found in many African folkloric traditions, and whose motifs, like those of the spider, traveled with the diaspora to other parts of the world, is another classic trickster figure. Often physically small and seemingly vulnerable, the hare consistently outwits larger, more powerful animals who sometimes represent tyrannical or foolish human rulers through sheer brainpower, agility, and an audacious disregard for convention. These stories, while humorous, often carried a deeper wisdom about the power of intelligence, the importance of questioning authority, and the possibility of the little guy triumphing over oppression. A wise king would understand the subtle social commentary embedded in these tales. Even animals embodying great power like the lion or the elephant, often symbols of royalty and strength, could also be depicted in legends as possessing ancient ancestral wisdom, or acting as enforcers of justice on behalf of the spirit world. A king who ruled unjustly might find himself confronted or tested by a majestic lion that was more than just a beast, but a manifestation of a territorial spirit or an angered ancestor demanding a return to Ma'at to right order. Forget your usual council of human advisors. Ancient African kings might find their best, if sometimes, most challenging strategic insights coming from a surprisingly articulate crocodile, a deeply philosophical pangolin, or perhaps a committee of very opinionated weaver birds. One can only imagine the kind of advice a pangolin would give, Probably something about the enduring benefits of a good suit of impenetrable armor and the wisdom of rolling with a life's many punches. These animal spirits didn't just offer unsolicited advice from the bushes. Their appearance or actions could be carefully sought or interpreted. A diviner might look for omens in animal behavior before a king made an important decision. A hunter, before embarking on a dangerous expedition, might seek a sign from his clan's totem animal. The wisdom these animal spirits imparted was often deeply practical, rooted in a profound understanding of the natural world and the intricate web of social relationships. They might teach about the importance of respecting nature's cycles, the need for communal cooperation, the dangers of pride or greed, the virtue of patience, or the strength found in humility. A quirky and rather specific tidbit might be the belief in certain cultures that a particular, seemingly insignificant animal, perhaps a specific type of beetle or a rarely seen nocturnal creature, was the exclusive messenger of a very powerful but shy deity. Spotting this creature at a crucial moment, or having it behave in an unusual way, could be interpreted by a skilled priest or diviner as a highly significant, if subtly delivered, divine instruction or omen, perhaps holding the key to resolving a royal succession crisis or a devastating drought. Folklorists and anthropologists still engage in extensive research and lively debate regarding the precise origins, the complex symbolic layering, and the patterns of diffusion or independent development of certain prominent animal archetypes, such as the wise tortoise, the cunning hare, or the all-knowing serpent, across the incredibly diverse tapestry of African cultural narratives, and how these figures reflect universal human observations about nature and society versus expressing very specific, historically rooted local cosmologies. What is clear is that for you listening to these ancient legends, the animal kingdom was not a separate, lesser realm. It was a world interwoven with the human and the spiritual. A world where wisdom could wear fur or feathers, where counsel could come in a croak or a roar, and where the rustle in the undergrowth might just be an ancestor in disguise, about to offer you a piece of advice that could change your life or indeed the fate of your entire kingdom. The animals were watching, listening, and often they had much to say. The wisdom of ancient Africa, as you've begun to sense, often came on 4 legs or a pair of wings, with animal spirits acting as counselors, messengers, and sometimes even as rather stern life coaches for kings and commoners alike. Their ability to shift shape or to be the chosen vessel for a divine or ancestral intelligence made every encounter with the animal kingdom a potentially significant event. But now let us venture deeper beyond the open savannas and the immediate surroundings of the village into the cool, shadowed, and often deeply enigmatic realm of the forest. For here in the rustling leaves among the ancient trees and within the hidden groves dwelt another host of powerful, elusive, and often shape-shifting guardian spirits, whose knowledge was as profound as their forms were mutable. The forest in many traditional African cosmologies was far more than just a collection of trees or a source of timber and game. A mainstream historical fact is that forests were widely considered to be highly sacred and spiritually potent environments. The abode of powerful nature spirits, ancestral guardians, or even specific deities who held dominion over the wilderness and its myriad inhabitants. Unlike the relatively open and sunlit savanna, the deep forest was a place of mystery, of dim light and tangled pathways. A labyrinth where it was easy to get lost, and where the ordinary rules of the human world often seemed to fade. It was seen as a place of transformation, of initiation, of potent medicines, and of powerful, sometimes eerie, spiritual encounters. You wouldn't just wander into the deep forest for a casual afternoon stroll with a picnic basket. It was more like respectfully entering a vast, ancient, and occasionally rather temperamental cathedral of nature. And you definitely wanted to be sure you were on the divine guest list, or at the very least had brought a pocketful of appropriate, spirit-pleasing offerings. The spirits believed to inhabit these verdant depths were as diverse as the forest itself. There were the great guardian spirits, often ancient and immensely powerful, who watched over the entire forest domain, ensuring its continued vitality and protecting it from disrespect or over-exploitation. Then there were the spirits of individual, particularly venerable trees. A giant baobab that had stood for centuries, a towering mahogany, or perhaps a fig tree with unusually sprawling roots, each considered to possess its own distinct consciousness and power. Sacred groves, too, were common particular areas of the forest deemed off-limits to ordinary mortals. or accessible only for specific rituals, perhaps because they were burial sites of important ancestors' places where powerful spirits congregated, or sites for secret initiation ceremonies. These forest guardians could of course be elusive, preferring to remain unseen. But when they chose to interact with humans, or when humans intruded too far or too disrespectfully into their domain, their shape-shifting abilities often came into play. A forest spirit might manifest as a majestic leopard, its spotted coat a perfect camouflage amidst the dappled sunlight and shadow observing you with unnervingly intelligent eyes. It could be a troop of chattering monkeys whose behavior seemed a little too organized, a little too knowing. Or perhaps a great serpent, ancient and wise, coiled around the branch of a sacred tree. Sometimes they might appear in more elusive humanoid forms, perhaps as a diminutive, shy forest person, quick to vanish if approached, or as a startlingly beautiful maiden by a hidden waterfall, or a gnarled old hermit emerging from a cave, each a potential guise for a powerful nature deity or an ancestral protector. Their version of a national park ranger was often a very ancient, possibly rather particular but undeniably potent forest spirit who really didn't appreciate littering, unauthorized chopping of sacred trees, or any general lack of respect for the woodland rules. And their enforcement methods. Let's just say they probably involved less issuing of polite warning tickets and more in the way of sudden, inexplicable disorientation, or perhaps a close encounter with a tree that seemed to actively dislike your chosen path. The knowledge and wisdom attributed to these forest spirits were often profound and highly sought after, particularly by healers, hunters, and those undergoing spiritual training. The forest was the ultimate pharmacy, and its spirits were believed to be the keepers of the secrets of medicinal plants. A traditional healer or herbalist might enter the forest with specific rituals and offerings, seeking guidance from the spirits on which herbs to gather for a particular ailment or how to prepare them for maximum efficacy. To disrespect the forest or its guardians was to risk losing access to this vital healing knowledge. For hunters, the forest spirits were equally crucial. They could grant success, leading the hunter to plentiful game, or they could conceal the animals, leading to an empty-handed return. Respectful hunters would make offerings perhaps to the spirit of the animal they hoped to catch, asking for its sacrifice and vowing to waste nothing. To hunt with greed, to kill wantonly, or to break taboos related to sacred animals or hunting grounds was to invite the spirit's wrath, which could manifest as hunting accidents, a complete lack of game, or even being led hopelessly astray deep in the wilderness. Forget just relying on your tracking skills. A truly successful ancient African hunter also needed a good working relationship with the local forest spirits, ensuring they hadn't accidentally been blacklisted for, say, telling a disrespectful joke about a sacred warthog. Sacred groves within the forest, as mentioned, were often the sites for initiation rites. The secret ceremonies where young people were transformed into adults, learning the deepest traditions, laws, and esoteric knowledge of their community. Forest spirits were often believed to guard these sacred processes, perhaps even to participate in them in some unseen way, or to reveal certain truths to the initiates during their seclusion and trials. Interacting with these eerie guardians required immense respect, caution, and an adherence to strict protocols. A quirky and rather common belief might be that certain specific sounds heard deep in the forest, perhaps a particular bird call at an unusual time of day, an inexplicable rustling in the undergrowth when no wind was blowing, or a faint distant drumming, was the unmistakable voice or movement of a specific type of forest spirit, a signal of its presence and perhaps its mood. Such a sound might cause travelers to halt, to make a quick offering, or to change their route entirely. There were also often strict taboos, prohibitions against shouting or making excessive noise in certain areas, rules against felling particular sacred trees without the correct rituals, or bans on killing specific animals, considered to be totems or companions of the forest spirits. Anthropologists and scholars of African traditional religions still engage in extensive research and debate regarding the precise relationship between the sophisticated traditional ecological knowledge, often abbreviated as TEC, regarding sustainable forest management, the medicinal properties of plants and responsible hunting practices found in many indigenous African cultures, and the pervasive religious beliefs surrounding the spirits and sacredness of these forest ecosystems. Was the spiritual framework primarily a culturally effective and deeply resonant mechanism for enforcing sound environmental stewardship and resource conservation? Or was the ecological wisdom itself understood by these ancient peoples as a direct gift, a form of ongoing revelation from these sentient and powerful forest guardians themselves. What is undeniable is that, for you, the traveler in ancient Africa stepping into the deep forest was to enter a realm where the ordinary rules of the sunlit savanna might no longer apply. It was a place of profound spiritual power, of hidden knowledge, and of elusive, shape-shifting beings who demanded your utmost respect. The rustling leaves might carry their whispers. The shadows might conceal their watching eyes, and every ancient tree might be a silent, knowing sentinel. The forest was their sanctuary, and you were but a guest, hopefully a welcome one in the domain of its eerie and often wise guardians. The deep primordial forests of ancient Africa, as you've now journeyed through in your mind, were not just collections of trees, but vibrant, sentient ecosystems. Their eerie silence often broken by the rustle of unseen spirit guardians, their hidden knowledge accessible only to those who approached with profound respect and an understanding of their mutable forms. But leaving the shadowed canopy behind your path now leads you to another vital, powerful, and equally spirit-infused feature of the African landscape. The rivers, the lakes, the sacred pools, and the great life-giving arteries like the Nile, the Niger, the Congo, or the Zambezi. And here too, in the shimmering depths at the thundering waterfalls, or along the quiet reed-fringed banks, dwelled a host of potent entities, water deities, and spirits whose forms could shift like the currents themselves, offering boons to the respectful or dire warnings to the foolish. Water in any land is life. But in many parts of ancient Africa, where arid savannas and scorching deserts often stretched for vast distances, the presence of a reliable river, a clear spring, or a deep lake was an almost miraculous blessing, the very foundation of existence. It quenched thirst, irrigated crops, provided fish for sustenance, and served as a pathway for travel and trade. It is no surprise, then, that a mainstream historical fact across numerous ancient and traditional African cultures is that these significant bodies of water were almost invariably considered sacred, the domain of powerful deities or indwelling spirits. These weren't just passive H2O molecules. This was conscious, active, and often quite temperamental water. Their version of a modern weather forecast or a hydrological survey report was often more like, "The great river serpent deity seems a bit tetchy this morning, according to the village diviner. Best delay that canoe trip and perhaps offer a particularly plump chicken to soothe its coils, just in case it's contemplating a flash flood or a sudden outbreak of unusually grumpy crocodiles." These spirits of the water were as diverse as the waters themselves. There might be a grand, overarching god or goddess of a major river, like Nyami, the serpentine river god of the Zambezi, believed to control the river's flow and provide for the Tonga people. Or there could be more localized spirits. The nymph of a particular waterfall, the guardian of a village, while the ancient spirit of a deep, mysterious lake. And these entities were often masters of metamorphosis. A river spirit might choose to manifest as a colossal crocodile, its eyes glinting just above the surface, a symbol of immense power and primal danger. It could appear as a giant serpent or python, its coils representing the river's winding path and its hidden depths. Sometimes, particularly in folklore, these water spirits took on alluringly beautiful human forms. Perhaps a captivating woman with long flowing hair like river reeds, or a handsome young man emerging from a misty pool, often to test reward, or even lure unsuspecting mortals. If you, as an ancient African villager or traveler, treated these water spirits with the proper reverence, they could bestow wonderful boons. They were often associated with fertility, not just the fertility of the land through irrigation, but also the fertility of people and livestock. Abundant catches of fish were seen as their gift. Safe passage across a dangerous river, or a journey by canoe untroubled by sudden storms or hidden snags was credited to their benevolence. Some water spirits were even considered oracular, their whispers heard in the lapping of waves, or the murmur of a spring, offering cryptic but valuable insights into the future or revealing hidden knowledge to those who knew how to listen, often with the help of a ritual specialist. And of course, there were always tantalizing legends of spirits guarding immense treasures hidden beneath the waters, treasures that might occasionally be bestowed upon a particularly virtuous or favored individual. So, if you happen to see a suspiciously glamorous individual with unusually damp hair emerge from the local river, offering you untold riches and a lifetime supply of perfectly ripe mangoes, your first thought probably wasn't, "Oh, brilliant free treasure and fruit." but more cautiously. Okay, what's the precise nature of the spiritual quid pro quo here? O mighty and possibly slightly soggy water deity. And will this transaction require me to say, sacrifice my second best goat? Or perhaps just promise to never again sing that rather unflattering song about crocodiles quite so loudly near your sacred whirlpool? But just as they could be generous, these water spirits could also be formidable and dangerous if offended. Their warnings were not to be taken lightly. A dream featuring an angry river god might foretell a devastating flood or a prolonged drought. A sudden inexplicable turbulence in a calm pool or the strange behavior of fish or river animals could be interpreted as a sign of the spirit's displeasure, perhaps because a taboo had been broken. The consequences of ignoring these warnings, or of directly polluting their sacred waters, felling protected trees along their banks, or fishing in forbidden areas or at forbidden times, could be dire canoes capsizing individuals, drowning fishing nets remaining stubbornly empty, or sickness striking those who drank the defiled water. Therefore, approaching any significant body of water in ancient Africa usually involved specific acts of respect and propitiation. Offerings were common. A libation of beer or milk poured into the current, a handful of grain or flour cast upon the surface, small beads or cowrie shells dropped into a sacred pool, or sometimes for more significant requests or after a serious transgression. The sacrifice of a chicken or a goat on the riverbank, its blood allowed to flow into the water to appease the resident spirit. A quirky and rather charming tidbit from some traditions might be the offering of a specific locally valued item considered particularly pleasing to the water spirit of that area. Perhaps a particular type of white clay, a string of rare river shell beads, or even a song or chant, sung only at the water's edge at dawn or dusk, its melody designed to soothe and honor the spirit. There were also strict taboos. You might be forbidden from making excessive noise near certain sacred pools lest you disturb the spirit's tranquility. There could be rules against pointing directly at a whirlpool or a spot where someone had drowned, as this might attract the spirit's negative attention. Certainly, any act that deliberately fouled the water would be seen as a grave offense not just against the community that relied on it, but against the spirit that embodied it. Forget just a municipal fine for polluting a waterway. Here, the penalty might be delivered directly by a very disgruntled deity in the form of a sudden, localized, and extremely inconvenient waterspout. Folklorists and anthropologists still engage in fascinating debates regarding the complex symbolic associations and potential historical origins of certain widespread African water spirit motifs, such as the powerful, often serpentine river guardian figures, or the alluring, sometimes dangerous mermaid-like entities found in many diverse traditions, and the extent to which these represent deeply ancient, indigenous cosmologies of water and fertility versus reflecting later influences or syncretic developments arising from interregional contact migration patterns and the dynamic exchange of myths along ancient riverine highways. For you as an inhabitant of this ancient world, the river that flowed past your village was not just a resource. It was a living entity, a powerful personality, a shape-shifting presence that demanded your respect, your gratitude, and your constant awareness. Its gentle murmurs could carry messages of wisdom. Its bounty could sustain your life, but its hidden currents and its potential for sudden fury were ever-present reminders of the potent, untamed spiritual forces that infuse the natural world, shaping your destiny with every ebb and every flow. The spirits of the wild, those elusive guardians of the ancient African forests and the potent deities of its life-giving rivers, as you've now imagined, often chose to reveal themselves in shifting, sometimes startling forms. A majestic leopard, a wise old serpent, or perhaps an alluring human figure emerging from a misty pool. Their messages, their boons, and their warnings were all part of the intricate spiritual landscape you as an ancient African traveler or villager would learn to navigate with respect and caution. But there was another, even more intimate and often profoundly influential category of spirit that could choose to walk among the living in a new guise, your own revered ancestors. For in many traditional African worldviews, death was not an ending, but a transition, and the spirits of those who had gone before remained powerful, active members of the family and community, sometimes choosing to return in a surprising new form to offer their timeless wisdom. A mainstream historical fact absolutely central to understanding countless traditional African belief systems is the profound importance and active role of ancestral spirits. These aren't just faded memories or names carved on a memorial. The living dead, as they are sometimes called by scholars, are considered vital ongoing presences in the lives of their descendants. They are the link between the human world and the deeper spirit realm, often acting as intermediaries with higher deities or the ultimate creator force. Their primary concern is usually the well-being, continuity, and adherence to tradition of their lineage and community. And to ensure this, they don't just watch silently from afar. They actively communicate, and one of the most fascinating ways they were believed to do so was by taking on a new temporary physical form. So, if a particularly wise-looking python suddenly took up residence near your family shrine and started offering what sounded suspiciously like your late great-grandmother Adama's very specific and usually quite astute advice on agricultural planning, you wouldn't immediately reach for a snake-charming flute or a sturdy stick. No, you'd more likely offer it a bowl of fresh milk. Listen very intently, and perhaps ask if great-grandma Adama also had any hot tips from the spirit world about where you misplaced your best goat-herding staff. The form these ancestral spirits might adopt were incredibly varied, often reflecting local beliefs, clan totems, or the particular message they wished to convey. Animals were a very common guise. Perhaps a specific type of bird whose sudden appearance or unusual call near your homestead was always understood by your family to signify the presence of a particular ancestor. It could be a majestic eagle, a wise old owl, or even a smaller, more everyday bird behaving in a significant way. Snakes, too. Particularly certain non-venomous pythons or house snakes were widely revered in many African cultures as embodiments of ancestral spirits. Their ability to shed their skin perhaps symbolizing rebirth and continuity. Seeing such a snake in your granary or near your dwelling might be taken as a sign that an ancestor was present, watching over the family's prosperity. Leopards with their stealth and power might be the form chosen by a chiefly or royal ancestor. Even domestic animals, a familiar cow behaving strangely, a goat that seemed to understand human speech, could in certain circumstances be suspected of carrying an ancestral presence. Sometimes ancestors were believed to return in human form, though often disguised. It might be a venerable old man or woman who suddenly appears in the village offering cryptic but profound wisdom and then vanishes just as mysteriously. Or perhaps a lost child who is taken in and through their innocent words or unusual knowledge reveals themselves to be a reincarnated elder or an ancestor sent to guide. These encounters were often tests of the living, a test of their hospitality, their kindness to strangers, their respect for the aged or the vulnerable. How you treated this unassuming visitor could determine whether you received an ancestral blessing or a subtle spiritual rebuke. You'd certainly want to be exceptionally polite and generous to any wandering strangers asking for a bit of water or a place to rest by your fire. It might not just be a weary traveler. It could be your founding clan ancestor in a very clever disguise conducting an unannounced pop quiz on traditional values and whether you've been keeping up with your offerings. The passmark was probably demonstrates adequate respect and provides snacks. Why would these ancestral spirits go to all the trouble of shapeshifting and paying a visit? Their motivations were usually deeply connected to the well-being of their descendants. They might come to offer guidance during a time of crisis, a drought, a famine, a dispute with a neighboring clan. Their wisdom drawn from their own life experiences and their new perspective in the spirit world was considered invaluable. They might appear to deliver a warning about an impending danger, a brewing conflict, or a transgression within the family that was upsetting the social or spiritual order. They could also manifest to test the character of the living, to see if traditions were being upheld, if elders were being respected, if communal responsibilities were being met. And sometimes, quite simply, they might appear to make a request. Perhaps they felt their gravesite was being neglected, or they desired a specific offering, or they wished for their name to be honored in a particular way, such as by being given to a newborn child in the family. Recognizing an ancestor in disguise wasn't always straightforward. It often relied on a subtle feeling, a sense of uncanny familiarity, or the visitor exhibiting knowledge or mannerisms that were strikingly reminiscent of the deceased. Sometimes the animal or person might have a specific physical mark that was known to have belonged to the ancestor, or the truth might only be revealed later through the interpretation of a significant dream that followed the encounter, or through consultation with a diviner or elder who could discern the spiritual nature of the visitation. A quirky tidbit from some traditions might be the belief that certain families had a specific messenger animal that almost always heralded a communication from their particular lineage ancestors. For example, if a certain rare type of butterfly with distinctive markings was only ever seen around the family compound, just before a major event or when an important decision needed to be made, it would be taken as a clear sign that the ancestors were present and offering their subtle input. Or perhaps there were specific rituals a family would perform if they suspected an ancestor was visiting in animal form, like setting out a particular type of food or drink known to have been favored by that ancestor in life as a gesture of welcome and respect. Anthropologists and scholars of African traditional religions still engage in considerable study and debate regarding the precise theological distinctions and the spectrum of beliefs in various cultures concerning the nature of ancestral spirits. For instance, the difference between the generalized power and influence of the collective ancestors versus the specific individual agency personality, and potential for distinct shape-shifting manifestations attributed to more recently deceased or particularly prominent and powerful ancestral figures within a given lineage or community. What is undeniable is that for you as an ancient African, the belief that your ancestors could return, cloaked in a new form, provided a profound sense of continuity with the past, a feeling that you were never truly alone, and a constant reminder of your obligations to uphold the traditions and values of your people. The wisdom they imparted, whether through the direct speech of a talking animal, the cryptic actions of a disguised stranger, or the subtle omens interpreted by a village seer, was not just a collection of quaint old sayings. It was living guidance essential for navigating the complexities of life, for maintaining harmony within your family and community, and for ensuring that the sacred bond between the living, the dead, and the ever-watchful spirit world remained strong and unbroken. Their family reunions, you might imagine, could get very interesting indeed. Is that really Cousin Tendai looking so unusually thoughtful today? Or is it Great Aunt Ishi, back from the spirit world, temporarily borrowing Tendai's rather distinctive earlobes to make a very pointed comment about the declining quality of our communal storytelling? One always had to be prepared. The spirits of your revered ancestors, as you've now come to understand, could return from the realm of the dead in a multitude of shifting guises, often as familiar animals or disguised humans, to offer their timeless wisdom, their protection, or sometimes a gentle or not-so-gentle nudge if you were straying from the path of tradition. Their appearances were usually taken with utmost seriousness, their messages pondered for deep meaning. But the spirit world of ancient Africa was vast and wonderfully complex, and not all of its shape-shifting inhabitants were so consistently grave or overtly benevolent. Prepare yourself now to encounter another altogether more unpredictable and often hilariously disruptive category of supernatural being: the clever, mischievous, and eternally surprising trickster spirit, whose pranks and deceptions, while sometimes causing no end of trouble, almost invariably carried a valuable, if unconventionally delivered lesson. A mainstream historical fact is that trickster figures are a prominent and absolutely vital archetype in the oral traditions, mythologies, and folklore of numerous African cultures, stretching from the West African savannas to the southern plains and beyond. These characters, often though not always taking the form of an animal renowned for its cunning, like the spider, Anansi being a famous example, the hare or rabbit, the jackal, or even sometimes the tortoise in a more woy mood, are typically characterized by their sharp intelligence, their amoral, or boundary-breaking behavior, meaning they often operate outside or in direct defiance of conventional human morality, and their masterful use of deception, wit, and very frequently shape-shifting. Their stories, while often making you chuckle at their audacity and the sheer absurdity of the situations they create, also serve incredibly important social functions, such as teaching moral lessons often, by demonstrating what not to do, explaining the origins of certain natural phenomena or social customs, and providing a culturally sanctioned outlet for questioning, satirizing, or even subtly subverting the established social order. If your village suddenly experienced a bizarre week where, say, all the left sandals mysteriously disappeared, only to reappear days later, meticulously tied to the horns of the village's most respected and rather grumpy sacred cows, you probably wouldn't immediately suspect a sudden outbreak of footwear-related kleptomania. No, you'd more likely nod knowingly and mutter, it seems that mischievous spider, or perhaps that cunning hare is in the neighborhood again. No doubt teaching us all a very convoluted and probably slightly inconvenient lesson about, something to do with humility, the proper respect for sacred livestock, or the unexpected aerodynamic properties of airborne sandals. The trickster spirit is a master of metamorphosis. Their ability to change their form is not just an incidental characteristic. It's absolutely essential to their modus operandi. One moment they might be an unassuming old woman asking for a share of your food the next, a fast-talking merchant offering you a deal that sounds too good to be true, and almost certainly is then a tiny insect listening in on secret plans or a powerful whirlwind causing delightful chaos at a solemn ceremony. This constant shifting of appearance allows them to infiltrate different social settings to expose the secret vanities or hypocrisies of others, to set their elaborate pranks in motion, and very importantly, to make a swift and often comically undignified escape when their schemes inevitably unravel or when a more powerful, less amused entity comes looking for them. The lessons imparted by these tricksters are rarely straightforward sermons. They don't usually stand on a metaphorical anthill and deliver a lecture on good behavior. Instead, wisdom emerges from the chaos they create from the unraveling of their own often greedy or arrogant plans, or from the way their actions inadvertently reveal the foolishness or moral failings of those they interact with. Be they ordinary humans, powerful chiefs, other spirits, or even the high gods themselves, a trickster might, through a series of elaborate deceptions, manage to steal all the wisdom in the world, and then through an act of overconfidence or clumsiness, accidentally spill it, scattering it for all humanity to find. Or they might challenge a fearsome tyrannical beast not with strength, but with clever words and cunning disguises, teaching that wit can often overcome brute force. Their version of an internet troll was probably a highly skilled, supernaturally powered entity who could literally change its avatar at will and whose pranks had far more significant and often more physically inconvenient real-world consequences than just a temporarily disrupted comment section. Interacting with the trickster spirit or finding yourself caught in the ripples of their latest escapade would be a bewildering experience. You might not even realize you're dealing with one until the punchline of their cosmic joke lands squarely upon you. One moment you're having a perfectly normal conversation with what appears to be a very lost and confused chameleon, and the next your prize-winning yams have vanished and the chameleon is seen sprinting over the horizon wearing a tiny, suspiciously yam-shaped hat and cackling with otherworldly glee. The feeling is often one of being outwitted, of having the rug pulled out from under your assumptions about how the world works, and of recognizing perhaps with a rueful smile your own gullibility or a previously unacknowledged foible. A quirky and rather delightful tidbit from some traditions might be the specific, seemingly minor, but incredibly annoying pranks attributed to a local trickster spirit, if it felt ignored or unappreciated. Perhaps your cooking fire inexplicably refuses to light, despite perfectly dry wood, or your favorite calabash for drinking water keeps getting moved to the most inaccessible part of your hut, or every time you try to tell an important story, a chorus of unseen frogs starts up at precisely the wrong moment. These wouldn't be seen as major disasters, but as the trickster's way of saying, hey, don't forget about me. A little respect and perhaps a small offering of something shiny or sweet wouldn't go amiss. Folklorists and cultural anthropologists still engage in fascinating debates regarding the primary societal function and underlying psychological significance of these ubiquitous trickster narratives across different African cultures. Do they serve more as agents of social critique and catalysts for necessary change by playfully or shockingly challenging established hierarchies and rigid norms? Or do their often chaotic and self-serving antics ultimately work to reinforce social cohesion and moral boundaries by hilariously and memorably demonstrating the negative consequences of unchecked greed, arrogance, foolishness, or antisocial behavior? What is undeniable is the profound value of these lessons, however unorthodox their delivery. The trickster in all its shape-shifting glory embodies the complexities, the contradictions, and the inherent unpredictability of life itself. They remind you that the world is not always as it seems, that appearances can be deceiving, that even the most powerful can be brought low by cleverness, and that laughter and humility are essential tools for survival. They are the agents of chaos that paradoxically help to maintain or restore balance. The fools who speak the deepest truths, the boundary crossers who show you where the limits are by gleefully and often quite messily transgressing them. So if you were traveling through ancient Africa and a creature that looked suspiciously like a giant talking praying mantis with a penchant for riddles offered you a once-in-a-lifetime deal on some prime riverfront spiritual real estate, it was probably wisest to politely decline, perhaps offer it a shiny bead for its trouble, and then walk away, very, very quickly in the opposite direction before you found yourself the bewildered star of a brand new and highly instructive cautionary tale. The mischievous, often chaotic, but ultimately instructive pranks of the trickster spirits, as you've now imagined, certainly kept ancient African communities on their toes, reminding everyone that wisdom can arrive in the most unexpected and sometimes downright inconvenient of packages. Their shape-shifting was a tool for disruption and revelation. But the ability to change form or to commune deeply with powerful animal spirits wasn't just the domain of these amoral agents of chaos. In many ancient African legends, such mystical transformations and profound spiritual connections were often the hallmark of legitimate power. The sacred attribute of kings, queens, chiefs, and great cultural heroes whose own shifts in form, or whose intimate bonds with shape-shifting entities serve to validate their rule, demonstrate their extraordinary capabilities, and channel divine wisdom for the benefit of their people. In numerous traditional African societies, the role of a ruler, be it a mighty king of a centralized state or the respected chief of a smaller community, often extended far beyond mere political or military leadership. A mainstream historical fact is that these leaders were frequently seen as possessing a unique, often hereditary spiritual connection to the land, to the founding ancestors of their people, and to the essential deities or life forces that ensured the community's prosperity and survival. Their well-being was often intrinsically linked to the well-being of the kingdom itself. And one of the most potent ways this special status was expressed in legend was through tales of their ability to transform, or to command or commune with spirits that could. So, if the reigning king in a time of great crisis suddenly excused himself from a particularly tense council meeting by announcing he needed to go and say, stretch his wings a bit, or have a quiet chat with his inner leopard about the current political climate, his advisors probably didn't just assume he was being poetically vague or needed a moment alone. They might genuinely understand that he was about to tap into a deeper, more primal source of power or wisdom, perhaps returning with some freshly caught antelope for the evening feast, a few new claw marks on the royal stool, and some surprisingly astute, if somewhat growled insights into how to deal with that troublesome neighboring kingdom. Legends abound of founding ancestors of royal dynasties, or particularly powerful kings and queens who possessed the ability to shapeshift into majestic and potent animals. The lion, with its regal bearing and formidable strength, was a common royal transformation, symbolizing courage, kingship, and the power to overcome enemies. A king who could become a lion was not just a ruler, he was the very embodiment of the land's untamed sovereignty. Similarly, the leopard, with its stealth, its beauty, and its deadly grace, was another frequent royal guise, often associated with chieftainship wisdom and the ability to move unseen and strike decisively. Elephants, revered for their immense strength, long memories, and deep wisdom, might be another form a great ruler or a wise old queen could adopt, perhaps to gain perspective or to physically protect their people. And soaring eagles or powerful hawks, with their keen eyesight and their connection to the heavens, could be the chosen form for a ruler seeking divine guidance or a far-seeing vision of the future. These transformations weren't just for show, a kind of ancient royal party trick. They served critical purposes. A king might transform into a mighty beast to lead his warriors into battle, inspiring them with his supernatural prowess. He might take on an animal form to secretly observe his kingdom, to understand the true needs and concerns of his people, or to uncover plots against him. Or he might shift shape to commune directly with powerful nature spirits, to negotiate with the guardians of the forest or the river for their blessings, or to seek their aid in times of drought or famine. Their version of a power suit for a truly influential ruler wasn't just a particularly elaborate feathered headdress or a robe made of the finest woven cloth. It might literally be the innate ability to become a 700-pound silverback gorilla. Makes for very persuasive and generally quite brief negotiations, one imagines. Even if a ruler didn't physically shapeshift themselves, they were often believed to have a profound, almost symbiotic relationship with a specific animal spirit or totem that was sacred to their clan or lineage. This creature, perhaps a particular antelope, a sacred python, a revered crocodile, or a specific bird, would be seen as the king's spiritual counterpart, his guardian, his source of power, or his messenger to the spirit world. The health and behavior of this totem animal could be seen as directly reflecting the fortunes of the king and his kingdom. The king in turn would be expected to perform specific rituals to honor this spirit, to observe certain taboos related to it, perhaps never hunting or eating that particular animal, and to heed any omens it might present. Great cultural heroes too. Those semi-mythical figures whose exploits often explain the origins of a people or the foundations of their customs were frequently endowed with shape-shifting abilities or had close alliances with powerful animal spirits. These transformative powers enabled them to overcome monstrous adversaries, to retrieve stolen sacred objects, to bring essential gifts like fire or agriculture to humanity, or to guide their people through epic migrations to new lands. Their mystic changes were a sign of their extraordinary destiny and their favor with the divine. A quirky and rather specific tidbit from some traditions might be a legend, where a king's ability to transform or his connection to his spirit animal depended on a particular, often secret ritual that had to be performed regularly or on the safeguarding of a sacred object. If this ritual was neglected, or if the object was lost or stolen, the king might lose his powers or even his right to rule, and disaster could befall the kingdom until the balance was restored. This would add another layer of sacred responsibility and perhaps a touch of royal anxiety to his reign. Historians and mythologists still engage in rich discussions and scholarly debate regarding the precise interpretations of these widespread African legends of royal shapeshifting and mystical communion with animal spirits. Were these beliefs in literal physical transformations? Were they primarily powerful symbolic metaphors for the king's profound identification with the vital forces of nature, the totemic essence of his clan, and his role as a conduit for spiritual power? Or were they perhaps carefully constructed ideological narratives, oral traditions meticulously preserved and retold to legitimize political authority, to underscore the sacred nature of kingship, and to reinforce existing social hierarchies and power structures within the community? Whatever the ultimate layers of meaning for you, listening to these ancient tales around a flickering fire, the message was clear. True leadership, true heroism often came with a profound connection to the spirit world. A connection so deep that the very boundaries between human and animal, between the physical and the supernatural, could blur and shift. The king who could walk as a lion, or the queen who could speak with the ancient serpent of the river, was not just a ruler of people. They were a custodian of Ma'at, in its broadest sense a living bridge between the seen and unseen worlds. Their mystic changes a testament to the awesome transformative power that flowed through all creation and their wisdom. A reflection of that deep ancient connection. You'd definitely want to be on that king's good side. Not just because he held the political reins, but because he might also be a part-time, very large, and potentially slightly grumpy elephant who remembered with inconvenient clarity if you'd been slacking on your communal tribute payments or generally disrespecting the royal pachydermic aura. The tales of ancient African kings and queens, those revered leaders and cultural heroes who could themselves transform into majestic lions or converse with wise ancestral leopards, as you've now imagined, speak to a world where power was often intertwined with profound mystical abilities. Their shape-shifting or their intimate communion with animal spirits served to legitimize their rule and demonstrate their unique connection to the deeper forces governing the land. But what about you? The ordinary villager, the farmer, the artisan? What if you encountered a creature behaving in a strangely intelligent manner, or witnessed an inexplicable transformation in the twilight, or were troubled by a vision that felt like a message from a being, not entirely of this world? How would you make sense of it? For this, you would turn to another crucial figure in many traditional African societies, the ritual specialist, the diviner, the shaman, the spirit medium, those gifted individuals believed to be capable of seeing beyond the veil and interpreting the often cryptic messages of shape-shifting spirits. A mainstream historical fact is that across the diverse cultures of ancient Africa, individuals recognized for their special ability to communicate with or interpret the spirit world played an absolutely vital role. These weren't just peripheral figures, they were often central to the community's spiritual and psychological well-being. Whether they were known as a Sangoma or Nyanga in some southern African traditions, an Obeya practitioner in parts of West Africa and the diaspora, a village diviner using specific local methods, or a priest dedicated to a particular deity known for its oracular pronouncements. These specialists were the intermediaries, the translators between the human realm and the often bewildering world of spirits, including those that could change their form. So, if a usually shy ducker antelope suddenly started following you home from the fields looking at you, with what seemed like your late grandmother's very specific expression of gentle disapproval, you wouldn't just assume you'd had too much sun. No, your first port of call would likely be the local specialist in supernatural communications, who probably had a degree in advanced antelope ancestor linguistics, and a minor in ominous gaze interpretation. These individuals were not self-appointed. Their calling often came through intense personal experiences, perhaps a profound illness and recovery, a series of vivid dreams or visions, or being chosen by a particular spirit. Their training was usually long and arduous, involving years of apprenticeship under an established master, learning vast amounts of oral tradition, memorizing complex rituals, understanding the properties of medicinal plants and spiritual herbs, and crucially developing the sensitivity and skills needed to perceive and interact with the spirit world. They learned to recognize the signs, to interpret the omens, to understand the symbolic language that spirits, especially shapeshifters, might use. When you as an ordinary person had an unsettling encounter or received what felt like a message from a shape-shifting entity, you would approach such a specialist with great respect and probably a suitable offering. You would recount your experience in detail, the form the spirit took, its actions, any words it spoke if it deigned to use human language, the time and place of the encounter, and any accompanying feelings or unusual phenomena. The ritual specialist would listen intently, perhaps entering a light trance or using specific divination tools to gain further insight. Imagine the scene: you're in a dimly lit hut, the air thick with the scent of sacred herbs burning on a small brazier. The diviner, perhaps adorned with special beads, animal skins, or other items signifying their connection to the spirit world, might cast a handful of cowrie shells, bones, or marked pieces of wood onto a mat, meticulously studying the pattern they formed. Or they might gaze into a bowl of still water, seeking images or reflections from the other side. A quirky and rather fascinating tidbit from some traditions might involve the diviner using a specific, often quite unusual tool, perhaps a highly polished tortoise shell that they listened to, or a particular type of gourd, filled with mysterious rattling objects whose sounds they interpreted, or even observing the behavior of a small sacred animal, like a particular lizard or spider, that they kept specifically for divinatory purposes. The interpretation offered would be based on a deep understanding of local cosmology, mythology, and the known characteristics and proclivities of different types of spirits. Was the shapeshifter a benevolent ancestral guardian offering guidance? Was it a mischievous nature spirit playing a prank or issuing a gentle warning? Or was it something more dangerous, a trickster spirit aiming to deceive, or even a malevolent entity? The form the spirit took was a key clue. A wise old serpent might signify ancestral wisdom or a chthonic earth deity. A beautiful elusive bird could be a messenger from a sky god. A hyena, as you know, might hint at a trickster or a spirit associated with the boundaries between village and wilderness, life and death. The specialist would then explain the likely meaning of the encounter and, very importantly, advise you on the appropriate response. If it was a positive message or a blessing, you might be told to make specific offerings of thanks. If it was a warning, they would prescribe rituals to avert the danger or appease the offended spirit. If the shapeshifter was seen as a test, they would help you understand the lesson you were meant to learn. Their version of customer support for when a shape-shifting river spirit was being particularly enigmatic or seemed to be demanding an unclear form of tribute involved less time on hold waiting for a chatbot and more time with a highly skilled diviner shaking some very insightful carved bones and perhaps interpreting the subtle but significant twitching of a sacred chameleon perched on their shoulder. Anthropologists and scholars of comparative religion continue to explore and debate the precise nature of the altered states of consciousness, trance experiences, or mediumistic abilities reported by and attributed to some traditional African ritual specialists during their divinatory and interpretive practices. Whether these are best understood as culturally conditioned performances and symbolic enactments, genuine psychophysiological trance states with unique neurological correlates, or perhaps a complex interwoven combination of both that facilitates their vital role as spiritual intermediaries and healers within their communities. What is undeniable is that these men and women, these seers beyond the veil, held a position of immense importance. They were the community's spiritual diagnosticians, its interpreters of the unseen, its guides through the often unpredictable and powerful world of spirits. In a world where a sudden change in an animal's behavior, an unusual natural phenomenon, or a vivid dream could all be messages from powerful, transformative entities, these specialists provided a crucial service. They brought meaning to mystery, offered pathways for appropriate action, and helped to maintain the delicate balance between the human community and the ever-present, ever-shifting spiritual forces that surrounded them. Without them, the whispers of the shapeshifters might remain just frightening, incomprehensible noise. With their help, those whispers could become wisdom. The ritual specialists of ancient Africa, those wise diviners, perceptive spirit mediums, and knowledgeable healers you've now met in your imagination, were the indispensable human bridges to the spirit world. They were the ones who could interpret the often cryptic pronouncements of your ancestors in disguise, or explain the deeper meaning behind an encounter with a talking tortoise or a shape-shifting forest guardian. But sometimes the message from the beyond wasn't delivered through complex dialogue or intricate symbolism that required lengthy priestly analysis. Sometimes the very act of a spirit, transforming the sudden appearance of an animal behaving in an unnervingly intelligent or uncharacteristic way, or a shift in the natural world that felt out of place, was the message itself. A potent, direct, and often urgent omen that the community guided by its seers would strive to understand. In a world so alive with spirit as you've come to appreciate, there were no true coincidences. Every unusual event, every deviation from the expected norm, particularly if it involved animals or striking natural phenomena, could be a sign of whisper from the unseen. A mainstream historical fact is that in many ancient societies around the globe, including a vast array of traditional African cultures, the interpretation of omens' importance was a critical aspect of daily life and decision-making. And when a spirit, already a powerful entity, chose to alter its form, or manifest in an unexpected way, this transformation itself was considered an omen of the highest significance, a clear indication that the spirit world was actively intervening or seeking to communicate something vital to the human realm. So, if your village's sacred ancient baobab tree, which normally just stood there being majestically arboreal, suddenly appeared to have developed a single enormous, sorrowfully weeping human eye in the middle of its trunk, one morning you wouldn't just assume it was a particularly unusual fungal growth. No, that would be a Category 5 red alert. All hands on deck omen, and the entire village led by the elders and diviners would be working overtime to figure out what deeply significant message the tree spirit, or perhaps an even higher power, was trying to convey. The meaning of such an omen in altered form would depend heavily on a number of factors, all carefully weighed by those with the wisdom to interpret. Firstly, the form the spirit took or the nature of the unusual manifestation was paramount. If a benevolent nature spirit, usually unseen, suddenly chose to appear as a flight of beautiful, pure white birds circling protectively over the village, during a time of sickness, this would almost certainly be read as a positive omen, a sign of divine favor, healing, and protection. Conversely, if a spirit known to be mischievous or potentially malevolent was seen to take the form of a particularly fearsome or unlucky creature, perhaps a giant, shadowy bat flitting through the village at midday, or a snake of a type associated with death or dark magic appearing in someone's home, that would be a deeply unsettling and negative portent, likely signaling impending danger, witchcraft at play, or the displeasure of some powerful entity. Forget a simple fortune cookie with a vague platitude. Your future might be much more vividly and sometimes alarmingly foretold by whether the guardian spirit of the local termite mound decided to manifest before you as a swarm of unusually friendly gift-bearing butterflies. Probably good, or as a rather large, distinctly irritated and uncharacteristically vocal rhinoceros with a very specific and judgmental stare, probably on balance, less good. The spirit's behavior in its altered form was also critical. Did the shape-shifted animal act calmly or aggressively? Did it lead you towards something or away from something? Did it deliver an object or try to take one? Did it speak if it took a speaking form? And what was the tone and content of its words? If, for instance, an ancestral spirit appeared as a familiar family dog, but refused to eat, whined at a particular door, or tried to lead you to a specific spot in the bush, these actions would be meticulously analyzed for their hidden meaning. Perhaps a warning about that part of the house, or a clue to something lost or hidden. The context of the sighting was equally vital. Who saw the omen? Was it a single, perhaps unreliable individual, or was it witnessed by many respected members of the community? Where did it occur? In a sacred place, a mundane setting, or a location associated with a particular spirit or past event? When did it happen? During an important ritual before a planned journey, or hunt during a time of drought or famine? All these elements would contribute to the richness and specificity of the interpretation. An omen seen by the king or chief, or one that occurred during a major communal festival, would naturally carry far more weight and be seen as having implications for the entire community, whereas one witnessed by a humble farmer in his own field might be interpreted as a more personal message. A quirky and often rather specific tidbit from some traditions might be the interpretation of counterintuitive omens. For example, in a particular culture, dreaming of or seeing a creature normally associated with, say, death or misfortune, but seeing it behave in a completely uncharacteristic, peaceful, or even helpful way, might paradoxically be seen as an extremely powerful good omen, signifying that a great danger has been overcome, or that a powerful negative force has been transformed into a benevolent one. Or there might be complex omens involving a sequence of transformations by a single spirit, with each successive shape adding another layer to the overall divine message, like a supernatural game of charades, where the stakes were incredibly high. The role of the diviners, shamans, and wise elders in these situations was paramount. While many people might have a basic understanding of common omens, a truly unusual or potent manifestation of a shape-shifting spirit would require expert interpretation. These specialists would draw upon their deep knowledge of mythology, local lore, the characteristics of different spirits, and perhaps employ further divination techniques to confirm or clarify the meaning of the omen. They would then advise the individual or the community on the appropriate response, what offerings to make, what rituals to perform, what actions to take or avoid, all to either embrace the good fortune foretold or to avert the impending danger. Their version of a breaking news alert from the spirit world required careful, considered analysis, not just a quick glance at a headline. Anthropologists and scholars of comparative mythology still actively debate the complex cognitive and cultural processes underlying the universality of omen reading and the interpretation of unusual natural or animal behaviors across diverse human societies. Whether these systems arise primarily from an innate human tendency to seek patterns and agency in the environment, from direct ecological observations passed down through generations, from deeply rooted totemic or ancestral belief systems, or through more intricate processes of metaphysis, symbolic association, and the social construction of meaning within specific cultural contexts. What isn't deniable is that for you as an ancient African living in a world alive with transformative spiritual power, the appearance of a shapeshifter or any significant alteration in the form or behavior of a known spiritual entity was rarely a matter of indifference. It was a sign, a message, an omen. The rustling leaves might just be the wind, but they could also be the whisper of a spirit changing its form, preparing to deliver a piece of wisdom, a warning, or a test. And your ability or your community's ability to correctly read these omens in altered forms was a vital skill for navigating the perilous yet profoundly meaningful pathways of life. The world of ancient Africa, as you're now keenly aware, was a place where the rustle of leaves, the cry of a bird, or the sudden shift in the wind could be far more than just a natural occurrence. It could be an omen, a message from the ever-present spirit world, a sign to be carefully deciphered by those with the wisdom to do so. Often the village elders or a specialized diviner, but these shape-shifting spirits, these guardians of the land and messengers from beyond, didn't always communicate from a distance through subtle portents. Sometimes they chose to engage with humanity much more directly, much more personally, by presenting individuals with challenges, with dilemmas, with what can only be described as a spirit's trial designed to test their character and impart vital, often life-altering wisdom. A mainstream historical fact echoed in the rich tapestry of folklore from countless cultures across the African continent is the common motif of encounters with spirits, deities, or ancestors who appear in a disguised or altered form specifically to test the virtue, the courage, the compassion, or the wisdom of human beings. These aren't just whimsical tales, they're often profound allegories, dramatic enactments of moral choices where your response to an unexpected encounter can have significant lasting consequences. So if you were an ancient African on a journey, or even just going about your daily chores in the village, and an unusually persistent and rather philosophical chameleon started asking you a series of deeply personal ethical questions about your recent life choices, you probably wouldn't just try to shoo it away. No, you'd recognize this as a potentially serious situation, an unannounced, possibly high-stakes pop quiz from the spirit world, and you'd want to choose your answers very, very carefully because your spiritual grade point average, and perhaps even your future well-being, could depend on it. One of the most common forms these spirit trials took was a test of your kindness and hospitality. Imagine you're a prosperous farmer, your granary's full. A frail elderly woman, a stranger dressed in rags, stumbles into your village begging for a little food and a place to rest for the night. Or perhaps you encounter a wounded animal by the path. A bird with a broken wing, a young antelope caught in a snare, looking at you with pleading eyes. How do you react? Do you dismiss the old woman with a harsh word concerned only for your own stores? Do you ignore the suffering animal, deeming it unimportant? In these legends, such figures are very often a powerful shape-shifting spirit in disguise. Perhaps an ancestral guardian, a nature deity, or even a messenger from the high god, specifically there to see if your heart is compassionate or if it has grown hard with prosperity or indifference. Their version of an undercover boss scenario was considerably more undercover spirit guardian, who might just be that slightly annoying, seemingly insignificant lost puppy you decided to share your water with, and who is now about to reveal itself as the mighty protector of the sacred baobab grove and offer you 3 wishes. Or possibly just a really good divinely inspired recipe for termite stew, which in a time of scarcity could be just as valuable. If you pass such a test, if you offer food and shelter to the disguised spirit, if you show kindness to the wounded creature, the rewards could be immense. The spirit might reveal its true form and bestow upon you a great blessing, perhaps a bountiful harvest for years to come. The gift of healing knowledge of a hidden spring in a time of drought, a protective charm for your family, or simply profound wisdom that guides you for the rest of your days. But if you fail the test, if you are cruel, selfish, or disrespectful, the consequences could be equally significant, though far less pleasant. The spirit might reveal its power by cursing your fields to barrenness, by bringing illness upon your household, or by simply leaving you with a stark, shaming lesson about your own moral failings. A lesson your community would likely also come to know. Another common trial presented by these shapeshifters was a test of courage or bravery. A young warrior seeking to prove his manhood, or a hunter venturing into dangerous territory might find himself confronted by a terrifying beast that is more than it seems, a shape-shifted spirit gauging his resolve. Does he flee in terror? Or does he stand his ground, showing courage and respect even in the face of fear? The outcome of such an encounter could determine his future status, his success as a warrior or hunter, or even his very survival. Tests of humility were also frequent. A powerful chief puffed up with his own importance might be visited by a seemingly insignificant creature, perhaps a small bird or an insect, that proceeds to outwit him or to deliver a humbling truth that pricks his arrogance. The spirit, through its unassuming form, teaches that wisdom and power are not always found in size or worldly status. Or you, as an ordinary person, might be asked to perform a seemingly demeaning or pointless task by a mysterious stranger. Your willingness to undertake it with good grace without complaint or pride could be the very thing the spirit is evaluating. A quirky and often quite imaginative tidbit from these tales might be the specific nature of an impossible task set by a shape-shifting spirit. Perhaps you're asked to count all the grains of sand in a sudden whirlwind, or to separate a huge pile of mixed seeds by nightfall, or to weave a rope from smoke. Often in these scenarios, the literal completion of the task isn't the point. It's your attitude, your perseverance, your cleverness in finding a workaround, or your humility in admitting you cannot do it but are willing to try your best that constitutes passing the spirit's trial. Folklorists and those who delve into the psychological underpinnings of myth still engage in rich debate regarding the primary underlying functions and deeper symbolic meanings of these widespread spirit trial narratives that are found in so many diverse cultures, including those across ancient Africa. Do these tales predominantly serve as straightforward vehicles for didactic moral instruction and the direct reinforcement of essential cultural values like hospitality, courage, and respect for the unseen? Are they perhaps symbolic representations of internal psychological struggles? Rites of passage in the challenging processes of individual maturation and the development of character? Or do they function as more complex, multi-layered allegories that explore the inherent ambiguities, the moral tests, and the often unpredictable encounters that define the human experience of navigating a world perceived to be alive with both benevolent and challenging spiritual forces? What is clear is that for you, the ancient African listener, these stories were far more than mere entertainment. They were a vital part of your education, your understanding of how to live rightly in a world where the spiritual and the physical were deeply intertwined. They taught you that every encounter, especially with the seemingly lowly or the unexpectedly strange, could be a test. They reminded you that virtues like kindness, respect, courage, and humility were not just abstract ideals, but practical keys to navigating a world where powerful, unseen entities could appear in any guise at any time, their altered forms often concealing a profound trial, a challenging lesson, or a life-changing piece of wisdom. You'd certainly learn to think twice before being rude to that persistent old tortoise blocking your path. It might just be the village's most ancient ancestral spirit, about to conduct your annual performance review on traditional values. The trials set by those wise disguised spirits, as you've now imagined, were often pathways to profound learning opportunities for you to demonstrate virtues like kindness, courage, or humility, and to receive blessings or hidden knowledge in return. These encounters, even when challenging, ultimately serve to reinforce the moral fabric of your ancient African community. But the world of shapeshifters, like the human heart itself, was not always filled with benevolent teachers or playful tricksters offering valuable, if somewhat convoluted, lessons. No, in the deep shadows of belief, there also lurked tales of forbidden shapes of spirits, angered by broken trust or disrespected taboos, and of humans who could twist the sacred power of transformation towards malevolent ends, bringing fear, illness, and misfortune in their wake. Just as the spirit world could offer guidance and protection, it was also understood to contain dangers, entities whose transformations were not meant to enlighten, but to harm. A mainstream historical fact found across a vast number of traditional African societies is the deeply held belief in malevolent human sorcerers or witches who were thought to possess the terrifying ability to shapeshift. These weren't your friendly neighborhood ancestral spirit popping by in the form of a wise old tortoise. These individuals, driven by jealousy, malice, or a lust for unholy power, were believed to transform themselves, often under the cover of night, into predatory or ill-omened animals, perhaps a slinking hyena, a silent hunting leopard, a screeching owl associated with darkness and death, or a venomous snake. All the better to carry out their nefarious deeds unseen, to spy on their victims, to spread sickness, or to wreak havoc upon an unsuspecting family or village. So, if your neighbor's prize-winning and usually very placid flock of sacred chickens suddenly started experiencing a series of inexplicable nocturnal disappearances, and around the same time, old Mr. Gbadamosi from down the lane, who you'd recently had a rather heated argument with over a disputed property line, began developing an unnerving habit of cackling like a hyena after dark, and seemed to have acquired an unusual fondness for raw chicken. You wouldn't just chalk it up to a particularly bold fox. You, and likely the rest of the village, might start to harbor some very serious, very fearful suspicions about Mr. Gbadamosi's nighttime hobbies and his potential for advanced and rather antisocial shapeshifting. The fear inspired by these human agents of harmful transformation was profound. They represented an inversion of the sacred, a twisting of spiritual power for selfish and destructive ends. Their ability to move unseen to adopt innocent or fearsome guises made them a particularly insidious threat and enemy from within, who could shatter the peace and trust of the community. But it wasn't just ill-intentioned humans you had to worry about. Even spirits that were normally considered neutral or even benevolent guardians of a place could become dangerous and take on terrifying forms if their sacred laws or taboos were violated. Remember those spirits of the forest or the powerful deities of the river? If you or someone in your community were to foolishly break a significant taboo, perhaps by felling a sacred tree in a protected grove, by persistently polluting a holy spring, by killing a totemic animal associated with that spirit, or by showing gross disrespect at a shrine, then that guardian spirit, its trust broken and its domain defiled, might transform its protective nature into a wrathful one. It might manifest as a monstrous, raging beast, or send a plague of venomous snakes, or cause the river to flood disastrously, its waters no longer life-giving, but destructive. Their version of "don't poke the bear" was often more along the lines of, "Please, for the love of all that is harmonious, don't deliberately annoy the ancient, incredibly powerful baobab tree spirit that has been peacefully minding its own business for the last 7 centuries, because it might just decide to transform into a swarm of very large, very angry, and surprisingly pointy-toothed locusts with a personal vendetta against your entire village's sorghum crop." There were also tales of forbidden shapes, certain transformations that were inherently ominous or dangerous to witness. Perhaps it was believed that seeing a particular spirit in its true, unveiled, and overwhelmingly powerful form, rather than its more common animal or human guise, could strike a person blind, dumb, or mad. Or maybe certain ritual transformations undertaken by priests or initiates during secret ceremonies were absolutely not meant for uninitiated eyes, and to accidentally stumble upon such a sacred shifting moment could bring dire personal consequences, a kind of spiritual backlash for having seen too much. The consequences of betraying a spirit's trust were also a common theme. If a shape-shifting spirit had revealed itself to you, perhaps shared a secret, offered its help, or entered into some kind of pact, and you then broke your word, misused the knowledge, or boasted foolishly of the encounter, that spirit could feel deeply betrayed. Its form might shift from that of a helpful guide to a relentless avenger, its former blessings turning into curses. The wisdom they shared was often sacred, not to be trifled with. A quirky and rather specific tidbit from some traditions might involve the belief that if you were clever or brave enough to call out the true secret name of a malevolent shapeshifter, while it was in its animal or disguised human form, you could strip it of its power, force it back into its original shape, or even gain some measure of control over it. This, of course, presumed you actually knew its true name, which was likely a closely guarded secret, adding another layer of mystical detective work to dealing with a suspected evil entity. Dealing with these dangerous transformations and angered spirits required the intervention of skilled ritual specialists, as you've learned. Diviners would be consulted to identify the source of the trouble. Was it a human sorcerer, an offended nature spirit, or a broken taboo? Healers and priests would then prescribe the necessary counter-magic protective rituals or community cleansing rites to neutralize the harm, appease the angered entity, and restore balance and safety. This might involve complex ceremonies, specific sacrifices, or even in the case of a human, proven to be a malevolent shapeshifter, a communal effort to expose and punish them, perhaps through shaming, banishment, or other traditional sanctions. Anthropologists and sociologists still engage in extensive debate regarding the primary social and psychological functions of these widespread beliefs in witchcraft, malevolent shapeshifters, and spirits angered by human transgressions within various traditional African societies. Did these beliefs serve predominantly as culturally sanctioned mechanisms for explaining and coping with unavoidable and often inexplicable misfortune, illness, and death? Were they sometimes used as tools for social control, perhaps by scapegoating marginalized or unpopular individuals within the community? Or did they represent more complex arenas for negotiating power relations, expressing communal anxieties about social cohesion, and reinforcing the importance of adhering to moral and ethical codes? What is certain is that for you as an ancient African, the world of shape-shifting spirits was not entirely one of benign wisdom and helpful guidance. It held its shadows, its perils, its stern reminders that the spiritual world, like the natural world, possessed immense power, that demanded respect, and that trust once broken or sacred laws once violated could unleash transformations of a much darker, more dangerous, and decidedly unwelcome kind. You'd want to be very careful about keeping on the good side of all the local spiritual bylaws. The fines weren't just a few cowrie shells or a goat. The penalty for seriously offending a powerful and now rather miffed shape-shifting entity could be a personal haunting, a village-wide misfortune, or a sudden inconvenient transformation into something small, crunchy, and easily stepped on. The world of ancient African shapeshifters, as you've begun to explore, was not always a realm of benign tests or playful trickery. You've now considered the darker paths, the forbidden forms taken by malevolent sorcerers, and the terrifying wrath of nature spirits or ancestors whose sacred trusts were broken or whose domains were disrespected. Such encounters underscored the very real power these mutable beings were believed to wield and the dire consequences of incurring their displeasure. So how did you, as an ordinary inhabitant of this spiritually charged landscape, strive to maintain a peaceful coexistence to ensure that the spirits around you remained benevolent, or at least neutral, rather than actively hostile? The answer in large part lay in a constant, often meticulous practice of respect and in the giving of gifts for the spirit's favor. A system of offerings designed to honor, appease, and petition these powerful, ever-present entities. In many traditional African worldviews, the relationship between humans and the spirit world was seen as deeply reciprocal. It wasn't a one-way street where humans simply hoped for the best. A mainstream historical fact is that the practice of making offerings to deities' ancestral spirits and various nature spirits is a virtually universal feature of these religious systems. Spirits, like humans, were believed to have needs, desires, and emotions. They could be pleased or angered, helpful or harmful, depending on how they were treated. Offerings, therefore, were far more than just symbolic gestures. They were a vital means of communication, a way to nourish the spirits, to acknowledge their power, to express gratitude, to seek their blessings, and very importantly, to appease them if an offense, intentional or accidental, had been committed. Their version of leaving cookies and milk out for Santa Claus was a much more frequent year-round affair involving a significantly wider range of spiritual entities and a far more diverse menu of carefully considered appeasement snacks and libations. You'd want to make sure Great Aunt Ish, currently believed to be residing in that unusually wise-looking old baobab tree, received her favorite type of honey cake offering on a regular basis, especially if you valued her continued spiritual goodwill and her usually quite accurate predictions about when the rains would come. So what kind of gifts did one offer to these powerful, often shape-shifting spirits to curry their favor or soothe their potential wrath? The types of offerings were as varied as the spirits themselves and the cultures that revered them. Food and drink were almost always central. You might leave a portion of your daily meal, a small piece of cooked yam, a handful of ground millet, a piece of fruit, at a household shrine, a sacred spot in the village, or at the base of a significant tree or rock. Libations were also common. Pouring a little water milk, palm wine, or locally brewed beer onto the earth as an offering to the ancestors or the spirit of the land. The first fruits of the harvest would often be dedicated to the spirits or deities who had ensured a bountiful crop. These weren't just about feeding the spirits in a literal sense, though in some beliefs that was part of it. They were also about sharing, about acknowledging that all sustenance ultimately came from the interplay of human effort and spiritual blessing. Beyond everyday foodstuffs, more valuable or symbolic items might be offered, especially when making a significant request or seeking to atone for a serious offense. Cowrie shells, which were used as currency in some parts of Africa, might be offered for prosperity. Colorful beads, pieces of fine cloth, especially white symbolizing purity, or even small metal implements or ornaments could be left at shrines. In some traditions, offerings of tobacco or snuff were considered pleasing to certain spirits or ancestors. For truly major occasions, perhaps before a dangerous long-distance journey, when seeking to end a devastating drought to purify the community after a calamity, or to appease a gravely offended deity or shape-shifting guardian spirit, an animal sacrifice might be deemed necessary. This, you must understand, was usually a very solemn and significant act, not undertaken lightly and always within a specific ritual context, often overseen by a priest or elder. The animal chosen, perhaps a chicken, a goat, or for the most important communal rites, an ox, had to be unblemished. The act was seen as offering a precious life force to the spirit world to restore balance or to seal a pact. The blood might be used to sanctify a shrine, and the meat was often shared in a communal feast, further reinforcing the bonds between the living, the ancestors, and the spirits. We'll speak of this generally, of course, focusing on the intent rather than graphic details. But offerings weren't always material. The respect shown to these powerful, mutable beings was itself a form of offering. This included adhering to their specific taboos, as you've learned, not disturbing their sacred groves, not polluting their rivers, not speaking their names disrespectfully. Prayer songs and dances performed in their honor were also potent offerings, expressions of devotion and acknowledgement. Sometimes a vow, a solemn promise to undertake a specific action, or to dedicate something to the spirit if a particular request was granted, was a powerful form of engagement. Forget a mere loyalty card for your preferred coffee shop. Maintaining a consistent record of high-quality offerings and deeply respectful behavior was your best strategy for staying on the preferred and protected client list of your local pantheon of potentially helpful, occasionally rather particular, and frequently transformative spirits. The manner in which offerings were made was also crucial. It had to be done with the correct attitude, humility, sincerity, and genuine respect. A grudging or careless offering was likely to be ineffective or even to cause further offense. There were often specific locations deemed appropriate for leaving gifts for different spirits. And sometimes the timing was important, perhaps at dawn or dusk, or on a particular day of the week or phase of the moon. Knowing what a particular spirit preferred, or what rituals were required to accompany the offering, was vital knowledge often held by elders or diviners. A quirky and very specific tidbit from some traditions might be the belief that a certain trickster spirit known for its love of shiny, intriguing, but ultimately useless baubles could be appeased or distracted from its mischief by an offering of just such an item. Or that a powerful river spirit particularly favored offerings of white clay gathered from a specific sacred riverbank. Anthropologists and historians of religion continue to explore and debate the primary perceived mechanism of efficacy behind these diverse offering rituals across different ancient African cultures, whether the offerings were understood more as literal food or sustenance that nourished and pleased the spirits, as symbolic gifts that established or reaffirmed a kind of social contract and reciprocal obligation between the human and spirit realms, or perhaps as deeply significant psychosocial acts that primarily benefited the human participants by focusing their intention alleviating anxiety and reinforcing crucial communal beliefs and social cohesion. What is undeniable is that for you, as an ancient African living in a world where powerful shape-shifting spirits were an integral part of your reality, the regular and respectful practice of making offerings was not just a religious duty. It was a fundamental way of navigating your existence. It was about acknowledging the unseen forces that shaped your life, about actively participating in the maintenance of a balanced and harmonious relationship with them, and about ensuring that the path ahead, whether through the forest across the river or simply through the challenges of daily life, was blessed by their favor, rather than cursed by their neglect or anger. You wouldn't just add to cart when it came to requesting a spiritual favor. It was a much more involved process of carefully selecting an appropriate offering, approaching the designated sacred baobab tree or riverbank or mountain shrine with the utmost respect, and sincerely hoping that the resident shape-shifting leopard spirit come guardian of good fortune was in a receptive mood and particularly fond of slightly fermented millet porridge that day. The practice of making offerings, those carefully chosen gifts for the spirit's favor, as you've now come to understand, was a vital way for ancient Africans to actively engage with the potent, mutable beings that shared their world. It was about honoring their power, seeking their blessings, and appeasing them if they had been angered. This was a known transaction, a recognized path of interaction. But what happened when the spirit wasn't so clearly identifiable? What if the powerful entity testing your worthiness or seeking to impart some profound wisdom wasn't thundering from a sacred mountaintop or shimmering mysteriously from the depths of a river, but was instead disguised in the most humble, the most unassuming, the most easily overlooked of forms? For in many ancient African legends, wisdom indeed wore many faces, and spirits often chose the guise of the lowly to truly gauge the content of a human heart. A mainstream historical fact resonating across countless mythologies and oral traditions around the globe, including a vast wealth of African folklore, is the powerful and recurrent motif of a deity, a significant spirit, or a revered ancestor appearing in a humble or deceptive disguise, specifically to test the character and morality of unsuspecting mortals. These weren't just whimsical tales of divine dress-up. They were profound moral allegories designed to teach that true worth is not measured by outward appearance, and that compassion, respect, and generosity should be extended to all, for you never truly knew who or what you might be encountering. Their version of "don't judge a book by its cover" was considerably more high stakes. Something along the lines of be exceptionally polite and generous to that rather dusty, unassuming old traveler who just asked for a sip of water because he might just be the all-powerful creator god on an incognito earthly inspection tour, and he's currently taking very detailed notes on your hospitality skills for your permanent cosmic record. Imagine yourself an ordinary villager in ancient Africa going about your daily life. An old woman, frail and dressed in tattered skins, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, stumbles into your compound. Her voice weak as she begs for a little food and a moment's rest in the shade. Or perhaps you come across a small child seemingly lost and crying by the path alone and vulnerable. Maybe it's an animal, a sickly dog shunned by others, a bird with a broken wing struggling on the ground, or even a common, unassuming creature like a beetle or a frog that seems to look at you with an unusual knowing intelligence. These are the classic disguises often adopted by powerful spirits in these tales. They choose forms that are easily dismissed, easily mistreated forms that might elicit scorn or indifference from the proud, the selfish, or the unthinking. The test is rarely a grand heroic challenge. No dragons to slay or mountains to move. Instead, it's a test of your everyday humanity. Do you share your meager portion with the hungry beggar, even if she has nothing to offer in return? Do you take the time to comfort the lost child and help them find their way? Or do you hurry past too busy with your own concern? Do you show a moment of simple kindness to the suffering animal? Or do you kick it aside? Do you listen patiently to the seemingly foolish ramblings of someone others dismiss? Or do you treat them with contempt? It's in these small, seemingly insignificant interactions, when you believe no one of importance is watching, that your true character is revealed to these disguised spiritual assessors. So if that slightly annoying, persistently croaking frog that seemed to be following you around your yam patch suddenly started dispensing surprisingly insightful agricultural advice, your first reaction probably shouldn't be to look for a bigger frog swatter. No, a wiser move would be to offer it a particularly juicy insect, listen intently, and perhaps inquire if his royal amphibiousness had any thoughts on the upcoming weather patterns. And then comes the revelation. If you have acted with kindness, with generosity, with respect for the seemingly lowly, the spirit will often dramatically cast off its humble disguise, revealing its true, perhaps glorious, or awe-inspiring form. The ragged old beggar might transform into a radiant goddess of bounty, the lost child into a powerful ancestral guardian, the injured animal into a wise nature spirit. And with this revelation come the rewards. Blessings upon your household, a promise of good fortune, the gift of a magical item, perhaps a self-filling pot, a cloak of invisibility, or a seed that grows into a medicine tree, or most precious of all, a piece of profound wisdom or a prophecy that guides you and your community to prosperity and peace. But if you failed the test, if you were cruel, dismissive, or selfish, the revelation would be a moment of terror and shame. The spirit in its true form would deliver a stern rebuke, perhaps a curse, that brings misfortune upon you or your lineage, or simply a harsh lesson that leaves you to regret your lack of compassion. The consequences of failing such a divine pop quiz could be considerably more severe than just a bad grade. It could mean a blighted harvest or a very unhappy village spirit. A quirky and often quite telling tidbit from these legends might be the specific, sometimes almost comically mundane disguise a very powerful spirit chooses. Imagine a great sky god, wanting to test the hearts of men, decides to appear not as a thunderbolt or a majestic eagle, but as a particularly scruffy three-legged chicken with a persistent cough. The villagers who shoo it away with curses are later confounded when the ones who offered it a few grains of millet in a warm spot by the fire are showered with blessings. Or perhaps a spirit takes the form of a worn-out, cracked cooking pot left by the wayside, and only the person who, out of a sense of tidiness or respect for even humble objects, bothers to pick it up and try to mend it, is granted its hidden wisdom. Folklorists and ethicists still engage in profound discussions and scholarly debate regarding the primary cultural and psychological functions of these widespread spirit in humble disguise or deity in beggar's rags narratives. Do they predominantly serve as straightforward vehicles for instilling and reinforcing a universal code of ethical conduct, particularly the virtues of hospitality, generosity towards strangers, and compassion for the vulnerable within the community? Or do they also operate on more complex social levels, perhaps subtly reinforcing obligations of care towards the genuinely elderly, orphaned, or impoverished members of society by imbuing them with a potential of hidden sacredness and the possibility of supernatural consequence for mistreatment? What is undeniable is that these ancient African legends, where wisdom so often wears the most unassuming of faces, taught a profound lesson. Look beyond the surface. They urged you to treat every being, every encounter, with a measure of respect and an open heart, because you never truly knew when you might be in the presence of something sacred, something powerful, something capable of bestowing great blessings or teaching you a vital truth. The rustle of leaves might be an ancestor, the cry of a small bird a message from a god, the old woman by the path a guardian spirit in disguise. In this world, the most profound wisdom often came not in a clap of thunder, but in a gentle whisper from the most unexpected of forms, reminding you that the sacred was not just in the grand temples or the distant heavens, but woven into the very fabric of everyday life, waiting to be recognized by a compassionate eye and a humble spirit. Your journey through the ancient African night has been filled with wonders and warnings, with spirits who tested your character from the most humble of disguises, and with ancestors who returned in new guises to offer their timeless counsel. You've seen how every rustle in the leaves, every unusual animal encounter, every whisper on the savanna wind could be a message, a trial, or a revelation from a world alive with transformative power. As we draw towards the close of our exploration of these forgotten legends, you might find yourself pondering the deeper meaning, the enduring truth that lies beneath this fascinating tapestry of metamorphosis and spiritual encounter. For in these tales of shape-shifting ancient Africa often encoded its most profound wisdom about the very nature of life change and the interconnectedness of all things. A mainstream historical fact is that the motif of metamorphosis of beings changing their physical form is not merely a collection of whimsical or frightening fireside tales. It's a powerful and recurrent symbolic theme found in the mythologies and oral traditions of cultures across the entire globe, and it holds particular richness and depth within many African cosmologies. Beyond a literal belief in spirits taking on animal or human shapes, these transformations often serve as potent metaphors for the great cycles of nature. The profound processes of social and personal development, the often illusory nature of outward appearances versus inner truth, and the fundamental sacred interconnectedness of all beings within the cosmos. The ancient African wisdom seems to suggest that if you really want to understand life, you need to appreciate that everything is in a constant state of becoming something else, and that the spirit within can wear many, many faces. Consider the great cycles of the natural world, so intimately observed by people living close to the land. The seasons turn, the moon waxes and wanes, the caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. The river floods and recedes, bringing new life from apparent desolation. The snake sheds its old skin to emerge renewed. This constant, visible process of change in the environment around them surely informed the understanding of spiritual transformation. A spirit taking on a new form was in a sense merely participating in this universal dance of metamorphosis. A reminder that death is not an end, but a transition, that decay leads to regeneration, and that the life force itself is endlessly creative and adaptable. Personal and social transformations, too, are often mirrored in these legends. The rites of passage that marked an individual's journey, from childhood to adulthood, from an uninitiated member of the community to a fully recognized and responsible one, often involved symbolic death and rebirth, a shedding of an old self and the emergence of a new identity. Tales of heroes or heroines undergoing magical transformations, perhaps enduring a period in animal form before re-emerging. As wiser, stronger individuals could serve as powerful allegories for these profound internal and social shifts. Their understanding of personal growth was perhaps a good deal more literal and occasionally more fur-covered than ours today. Forget a weekend self-help workshop. To truly gain perspective in some of these ancient tales, you might find yourself temporarily transformed into, say, a slightly bewildered, but ultimately much wiser warthog for a season and experience, guaranteed to teach you a thing or two about humility and the importance of good foraging skills. The wisdom imparted by these shape-shifting spirits, as you've seen, often revolved around the crucial understanding that true reality, true worth, or true danger is not always reflected in the surface appearance. The frail old woman begging for water might be a powerful goddess in disguise. The unassuming small bird might carry a message from the Creator. The fearsome beast might be a guardian spirit testing your courage, not your fighting prowess. These stories constantly urged you to look deeper, to listen more carefully, to cultivate discernment, and to treat all beings with a measure of respect, for you never truly knew the true spiritual nature, the hidden face of what you encountered. This emphasis on seeing beyond the superficial is a profound piece of enduring wisdom. It speaks to the importance of empathy, of understanding the world from perspectives other than your own. A lesson powerfully embodied in the very idea of a spirit being able to inhabit an animal form and experience the world as that animal does. It also highlighted the interconnectedness of all life. If a human could become an animal, or an animal could speak with human wisdom, or a tree could house an ancestor, then the lines between human, animal, plant, and spirit were not rigid and impermeable, but fluid and interactive. This fostered a deep ecological consciousness, an understanding that all parts of creation were related and deserving of respect. A quirky and rather lovely African proverb that might encapsulate some of this wisdom could be something along the lines of, "The river that is smooth on the surface may hide crocodiles below." Or perhaps, "Do not judge the termite mound by its humble exterior, for it houses a complex city within. Han Ayita. These simple sayings echo the deeper truth found in the shape-shifting legends that what you see is not always what you get, and that true understanding requires looking beneath the surface of things. The very act of transformation in these stories often served as a catalyst for revealing truth or restoring justice. A trickster spirit might change its form multiple times to expose the folly of a greedy chief. An ancestral spirit might take on a fearsome guise to frighten away those who would harm its descendants. The metamorphosis itself was a dynamic event, a sign that the spiritual world was actively engaging with the human realm, often to correct an imbalance or to impart a necessary lesson. Folklorists, anthropologists, and philosophers continue to engage in rich and insightful debate regarding the primary psychosocial functions and the deepest symbolic resonances of these pervasive shape-shifting narratives within human societies across time and culture. Do they primarily serve as allegorical explorations of the fluid nature of identity, the anxieties and wonders of psychological and social change, and the complex, often ambiguous human relationship with the natural world and its myriad creatures? Are they in some instances literalized accounts or symbolic representations of shamanistic trance experiences, soul journeys, or other altered states of consciousness where the boundaries of self and form are perceived to dissolve? Or do they function as intricate and highly sophisticated symbolic systems for encoding, preserving, and transmitting core cultural knowledge, ethical frameworks, and foundational cosmological understandings from one generation to the next? What seems undeniably true as you reflect on these ancient African legends is that the concept of metamorphosis of beings who could transcend their given forms was a powerful and versatile way of exploring the deepest truths of existence. It spoke to a world that was not fixed and static, but fluid, dynamic, and filled with hidden potentials. The forgotten wisdom of these shapeshifters often reminds us that change is the only constant, that perception is often limited, and that the spirit in its essence is boundless, capable of wearing countless faces to teach its enduring lessons. The ultimate secret of life whispered by these transformative entities often wasn't some complex magical incantation, but something far more profound and simple. Be kind. Be respectful. Pay attention to the world around you in all its forms, and remember that true wisdom, like a spirit in disguise, can appear when and where you least expect it. And so as the fire in your ancient African campsite burns down to glowing embers, and the myriad tales of shape-shifting spirits with their hidden wisdom and their transformative power begin to settle in your mind, our journey for tonight gently draws to its close. The rustling whispers of the savannah, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, the vast star-dusted sky, all seem to hold the echo of these ancient mutable beings. Imagine the deep velvet quiet of the African night enveloping you. The air is cool now, carrying the scent of dry earth, of distant wood smoke, and perhaps the faint, sweet fragrance of unseen night-blooming flowers. The moon, a silver sliver or a luminous orb, casts an ethereal glow over the landscape, transforming the familiar into something mysterious and new, much like the spirits themselves. The great overarching silence is broken only by the gentle chirping of crickets, the soft hoot of an owl, or the almost inaudible sigh of the wind as it breathes across the plains, carrying with it the ancient secrets of the land. Let the images of transformation of spirits in disguise of wisdom found in unexpected forms now soften and recede. The need to interpret to understand the lessons, to be wary of the trickster or respectful of the ancestor, can now rest. The stories have been told, their wisdom absorbed. There are no more shifting shapes to discern in the shadows, no more hidden messages to decode. There is only this present moment of profound peace, this gentle transition from a world alive with spirit to the quiet sanctuary of your own impending sleep. Allow your body to feel heavy and relaxed, your mind to become still and serene like a calm watering hole reflecting the tranquil starlight. Let your breath be a soft, even rhythm, a gentle tide carrying you effortlessly toward the shores of slumber, where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest, and where perhaps in your own dreams you might encounter a whisper of that ancient transformative wisdom, ensuring only the most peaceful and insightful of night visions. The ancient African worldview, as you've now journeyed through in your imagination, was one where metamorphosis was not just a fantastical notion, but a profound metaphor for the cycles of life, the hidden nature of wisdom, and the deep interconnectedness of all existence. The shape-shifting spirits in their myriad form, from wise ancestral animals to tricky sprites, from powerful nature guardians to deities in humble disguise, all serve to convey essential truths about how to live rightly in a world perceived to be alive with spiritual forces. But as the centuries have turned, as new faiths have arrived, as great empires have risen and fallen, and as modernity has reshaped so much of the African continent, you might wonder what has become of these ancient beliefs, these forgotten legends of transformation. Do they still whisper to us from the past, or have their echoes faded entirely into the mists of time? The truth, as is often the case with deeply rooted cultural traditions, is that these ancient echoes are far from silent. A mainstream historical fact is that many of the archetypal figures, the narrative themes, the symbolic meanings, and the core wisdom derived from ancient African mythologies, including those powerful tales concerning shape-shifting spirits, cunning tricksters, and the intricate relationship between the human and spirit worlds, continue to resonate profoundly in contemporary African storytelling literature, art, and popular culture. The forms may have evolved, the context may have shifted, but the essence, the spirit of these ancient narratives often endures with remarkable vitality. One of the primary reasons for this persistence is the enduring power of oral tradition itself. For millennia, these stories were not primarily confined to dusty scrolls or stone inscriptions. They lived and breathed in the voices of storytellers and the songs of praise. Singers in the communal dramas of ritual and festival, passed down from grandparent to grandchild around countless firesides. This dynamic living transmission allowed the tales to adapt to take on new nuances, yet retain their core meanings. And even with the rise of literacy and modern media, that deep cultural reservoir of oral lore continues to inform and inspire. It seems that a truly compelling story about, say, a remarkably clever spider who manages to outwit a sky god and bring stories to humanity, or a brave woman who transforms into a gazelle to save her people, has a much longer and more vibrant shelf life than most things in this fleeting world. You just can't keep a good, wise, shape-shifting trickster down, even across the span of centuries. You see these ancient echoes in the continued importance of certain animal symbolism in many African cultures. The lion may still represent courage and royalty, the leopard stealth, and chieftainship, the serpent. Ancient wisdom or chthonic power, the tortoise patience, and particular birds may still be seen as messengers or omens. These aren't just quaint folkloric remnants. They often carry deep cultural and even spiritual weight, informing proverbs, personal names, clan totems, and artistic motifs. The figure of the trickster, that master of metamorphosis and chaotic instruction, is particularly resilient. Whether it's Anansi, the spider brer rabbit, whose origins are deeply rooted in African hair trickster tales or local equivalents. These cunning, boundary-breaking characters continue to appear in children's stories, animated features, and contemporary literature, still using their wits to challenge the powerful, expose folly, and impart lessons about survival and social navigation. Their forms may be updated, their pranks may involve more modern technology, but their essential spirit, that of the clever underdog, the irreverent questioner, the agent of change, remains incredibly relevant. Moreover, the underlying animistic worldview, that sense of a world alive with spirit, where nature is not inert but sentient, and where the boundary between the human and the other is permeable, still informs the spiritual landscape for many. Belief in nature spirits, in the power of sacred groves or rivers, or in the ability of ancestors to influence the living, continues to shape how many communities interact with their environment and with each other, sometimes existing alongside or even subtly blending with the teachings of Christianity or Islam, which themselves have taken on distinctly African expressions across the continent. A quirky and rather delightful modern tidbit might be the way certain traditional African proverbs or sayings, which often encapsulate the wisdom found in these ancient legends about animals or spirits, are still commonly used in everyday conversation, even in bustling modern cities. A proverb like, "The frog does not jump backward," meaning one should always move forward, not dwell on the past, or "A roaring lion kills no game," emphasizing action over mere threats, might have its roots in ancient animal fables and still carry potent meaning today. Or you might find contemporary African artists, musicians, or filmmakers explicitly drawing upon the imagery and narratives of shapeshifters and traditional spirit beliefs to explore modern themes of identity, cultural change, or social commentary. The world of modern African literature is particularly rich with these echoes. Acclaimed writers from across the continent have masterfully woven traditional myths, legends of transformation, and the intricate spiritual cosmologies of their peoples into powerful contemporary novels and plays, using these ancient forms to explore post-colonial realities, the complexities of modern identity, and the enduring human search for meaning. Figures like Chinua Achebe, Wole, Soyinka Ngugi wa Thiong'o Ben Okri, and many others have demonstrated how these forgotten beliefs are in fact a living, breathing source of profound literary and philosophical inspiration. Forget superhero cinematic universes that have been around for a few decades. Many ancient African cultures have possessed their own incredibly rich, complex, and deeply philosophical, shapeshifter storytelling universe for literally thousands of years, and some of those original powerful characters are still making very significant guest appearances in highly acclaimed modern narratives. Folklorists, cultural critics, and scholars of post-colonial studies continue to engage in vital and ongoing debate regarding the complex ways in which these ancient African spiritual beliefs, oral traditions, and mythic archetypes are represented, reinterpreted, and transformed in contemporary globalized contexts. They explore whether these traditions are being authentically preserved and dynamically revitalized by new generations, whether they are sometimes at risk of being commodified, essentialized, or misunderstood when taken out of their original cultural context, or how they are being creatively reimagined to address urgent contemporary social, political, and environmental issues. What is undeniable as you reflect on this enduring legacy is that the ancient African legends of shape-shifting spirits, with all their wisdom, their warnings, their tests, and their deep connection to a spiritually animate world, have left an indelible imprint. These are not just relics of a forgotten past. They are living echoes still capable of informing our understanding of human nature, our relationship with the world around us, and the timeless power of story to convey profound truths in 1,000 different, ever-changing, and wonderfully mutable forms. The spirits, it seems, are still shifting, still speaking, if only we learn once again how to listen. The echoes of ancient African lore, as you've now considered, continue to resonate in modern storytelling art and cultural understanding, a testament to the enduring power of these foundational myths and the archetypal figures of shape-shifting spirits who populated them. As our own exploration of this rich and transformative spiritual landscape draws to its final quiet close, for tonight you might find yourself contemplating the deepest, most timeless reasons why humanity, not just in ancient Africa, but across the globe, has always been so profoundly captivated by the idea of metamorphosis, of a world alive with spirits capable of changing their form, and the enduring wisdom that such beliefs seem to offer. This is a reflection on the continent's shifting soul, and indeed on the ever-mutable nature of our own. A mainstream historical fact, one that stretches far beyond the savannas and forests of Africa, is that the belief in transformation, where gods, spirits, humans, or animals can alter their physical forms, is an almost universal archetype found in the mythologies, religions, and folklore of nearly every human culture. This persistent recurring theme often symbolizes the most profound psychological processes, the great cyclical rhythms of nature. Birth, growth, death, and regeneration, the complexities of social and personal development, like rites of passage transforming a child into an adult. The often illusory nature of outward appearances when contrasted with inner truth, and the fundamental, often sacred interconnectedness of all forms of life within the cosmos. It seems the ancient human operating system, whether it first booted up on the African plains and the valleys of Mesopotamia, or the forests of Europe, has always come pre-installed with a powerful app for pondering the big what-ifs of transformation and trying to figure out if that unusually chatty raven is actually just a raven, or Uncle Thabo having a bit of a feathered moment. For the ancient African societies we've journeyed through, in our imagination, this belief in a world alive with spiritual metamorphosis served so many vital functions. It provided a coherent framework for understanding a world that, while often beautiful, could also be unpredictable and dangerous. Why did the river suddenly flood? Perhaps the river spirit was angered or transforming its power. Why did that wise old woman offer such perfect advice just when you needed it? Perhaps she was an ancestor in disguise. These beliefs offered explanations not necessarily in a scientific sense, but in a way that provided meaning, order, and a sense of agency in the face of life's mysteries. This worldview also fostered a profound connection to and respect for the natural world. If any animal, any tree, any mountain could be the vessel for a powerful spirit, then your relationship with nature was not one of mere exploitation or dominance, but one of careful, respectful coexistence and reciprocity. The wisdom gained from these shape-shifting spirits was often deeply ecological teaching about the balance of nature, the importance of sustainable practices, and the consequences of greed or disrespect for the earth and its myriad inhabitants. Moreover, these legends of transformation were powerful vehicles for moral and ethical instruction. As you've seen, spirits in disguise often tested human character, your compassion, your honesty, your humility. The stories of these encounters, passed down through generations, reinforce the core values of the community, teaching children and reminding adults what it meant to be a good person, a responsible member of the group, and how to live in accordance with the spiritual laws that governed their universe. The very idea of shapeshifting speaks to a deep human understanding of potential, of the capacity for change and growth. If spirits could transform, then perhaps humans too, on a metaphorical or spiritual level, could transcend their limitations, overcome their flaws, and aspire to a higher state of being or wisdom. The journey of the hero in many of these tales often involves a personal metamorphosis, a shedding of an old self spurred by encounters with these transformative spiritual guides or adversaries. So the next time you feel like you're undergoing a major personal transformation, just remember you're participating in a very ancient and highly respected tradition. Though hopefully your particular metamorphosis involves slightly less spontaneous sprouting of fur or feathers, unless of course that's specifically what you're aiming for. A quirky and rather insightful modern parallel might be found in certain psychological theories like Carl Jung's concept of archetypes and the shadow self. The idea that we all have hidden aspects to our personalities, parts of ourselves that can transform or be projected onto others, and that true wisdom involves integrating these different facets, finds a fascinating resonance in these ancient tales of spirits who wear many faces and embody diverse, sometimes contradictory qualities. Or consider how contemporary environmental movements, with their calls for a deeper respect for nature and an understanding of its interconnectedness, subtly echo the ancient animistic reverence found in these traditions, urging us to see the world not as a collection of inert resources, but as a living, responsive, and perhaps even a sacred entity. Philosophers, theologians, cognitive scientists, and scholars of mythology continue to engage in profound and often captivating debate regarding the fundamental origins and the enduring cross-cultural power of humanity's deep-seated belief in supernatural entities' spiritual realms, and the very possibility of transformative experiences. Do these beliefs arise primarily from evolved cognitive biases that lead us to perceive agency and intention in the world around us? Are they rooted in deep psychological needs for meaning, for comfort in the face of mortality, or for a sense of control over an often unpredictable environment? Are they primarily culturally constructed symbolic systems that serve to bind communities together and transmit essential social and ethical knowledge? Or do they perhaps, as many ancient traditions themselves maintain, sometimes stem from genuine, if not always easily quantifiable human encounters with dimensions of reality that lie just beyond the veil of ordinary material perception? What is certain as you reflect on the rich tapestry of ancient African legends of shape-shifting spirits is that they represent far more than just charming folktales. They are a testament to the incredible imaginative power of the human spirit, our enduring quest to understand our place in a vast and mysterious universe, and our timeless need to find wisdom, guidance, and a sense of sacred connection in the world around us and within ourselves. Perhaps the ultimate enduring wisdom from Africa's shifting spirits is simply this: that the world is far more magical, more fluid, more interconnected, and more full of surprising hidden potentials than we often allow ourselves to perceive. A truly wonderful and rather soothing thought to drift off to sleep with. Word count 38. And so, as the fire in your ancient African campsite burns down to glowing embers, and the myriad tales of shape-shifting spirits with their hidden wisdom and their transformative power begin to settle in your mind, our journey for tonight gently draws to its close. The rustling whispers of the savannah, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, the vast star-dusted sky, all seem to hold the echo of these ancient mutable beings. Imagine the deep, velvet quiet of the African night enveloping you. The air is cool now, carrying the scent of dry earth, of distant wood smoke, and perhaps the faint, sweet fragrance of unseen night-blooming flowers. The moon, a silver sliver or a luminous orb, casts an ethereal glow over the landscape, transforming the familiar into something mysterious and new, much like the spirits themselves. The great overarching silence is broken only by the gentle chirping of crickets, the soft hoot of an owl, or the almost inaudible sigh of the wind as it breathes across the plains, carrying with it the ancient secrets of the land. Let the images of transformation of spirits in disguise of wisdom, found in unexpected forms, now soften and recede. The need to interpret to understand the lessons, to be wary of the trickster or respectful of the ancestor, can now rest. The stories have been told, their wisdom absorbed. There are no more shifting shapes to discern in the shadows, no more hidden messages to decode. There is only this present moment of profound peace, this gentle transition from a world alive with spirit to the quiet sanctuary of your own impending sleep. Allow your body to feel heavy and relaxed, your mind to become still and serene like a calm watering hole reflecting the tranquil starlight. Let your breath be a soft, even rhythm, a gentle tide carrying you effortlessly towards the shores of slumber, where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest, and where perhaps in your own dreams you might encounter a whisper of that ancient transformative wisdom, ensuring only the most peaceful and insightful of night visions.